Kenichi, the party leader, leans back with a smug grin and tells Hirotaka that he is officially kicked out of the group. He freezes on the spot, his mouth hanging open as he tries to process the news. As he asks for a reason, Kenichi doesn't even look up from his meal, stating they simply can't keep a useless member around forever. Thinking back, it's only been half a year since their group of 7 first arrived in this world. They were all granted special skills to hunt monsters and were hailed as the party destined to defeat the Demon King. Looking at him now, the tavern crowd can't help but snicker. They find it hard to believe someone so plain-looking could be part of such a famous group of heroes. Kenichi leans back and laughs, openly mocking the name of his ability. He tells him to go ahead and show everyone that trash collection skill one last time before he disappears. Choosing not to fight back, he just stands up with a quiet, serious look on his face. Instead of arguing, he reaches out his hand to show them exactly what he can do. Light begins to gather in his palm as he activates the power. Suddenly, a small glass bottle pops into existence right between his fingers. This is his waste item recovery skill, which pulls random abandoned objects from across the world every 12 hours. Looking at the bottle, he's actually pretty happy to see a useful potion pop up. Even so, the rest of the party just watches from the table with bored, judgmental looks. Then the entire room erupts into laughter. They start howling about how pathetic his ability is, calling him nothing more than a glorified trash picker. Kenichi leans back with a smug look, pointing out that even if he finds something, it's only worth pocket change anyway. In his eyes, the guy is just a useless burden since he can't even fight. Shaking his head, he adds that it's embarrassing for a 32-year-old to be babied by a bunch of teenagers. Finally reaching his limit, Hirotaka yells at them to shut up. He figures that while he has the memories of an adult, he's still only 17 in this body. The party keeps piling on, calling him a useless disgrace and telling him to go eat garbage. Taking every hit in silence, he just stares ahead as the insults continue to rain down. Someone in the background even mumbles that they might be taking the bullying a bit too far. Finally, he snaps back that he's done with this place and turns to leave for good. Before he can step away, Kenichi stops him to demand he leave his equipment behind since it was bought with party funds. Hirotaka mumbles that they can have it, insisting he never wanted their handouts anyway. He goes quiet for a second, staring at the floor while his hands start to shake. Opposite him, Kenichi just watches with a dull, indifferent look on his face. Suddenly, Hirotaka scoops up his heavy sacks of scavenged loot and shouts that he's keeping every bit of his trash. The leader just scoffs at the outburst, telling him they don't want that garbage anyway. He hits the dirt hard as the party tosses him out like a sack of laundry, with his bags of scavenged junk flying out right behind him. A split second later, the heavy tavern door slams shut with a loud thud, making the rejection official. Scrambling to his feet, he shouts at the closed door, telling them they'll never defeat the Demon King if they only care about living in luxury. Inside, the sounds of cheering and clinking mugs just keep going, proving the group has already moved on without him. He lets out a long sigh and rubs his head, the adrenaline finally fading into a dull ache. Sitting there in the dust with his 3 bags of trash, Hirotaka finally admits that maybe he really was just dead weight to the team. He thinks back to his time in modern Japan, where he spent his days working as a professional waste collector. Wiping his brow after a heavy lift, he checks to make sure the truck is fully loaded. That's when he notices a worn-out teddy bear sitting alone in the middle of the junk. The previous owner's daughter points it out, realizing her toy got caught up in the pile. Without missing a beat, her mother tells him to just toss it, since they don't want it anymore. He looks down at the stuffed bear, thinking about how something once loved can be treated like junk so easily. Even knowing how much a child might have cherished it, he was still forced to throw it in the back. Eventually, the truck pulls away from the neighborhood, leaving another set of memories for the landfill. Thinking back on it now, he wonders if he's just the weird one for finding the whole idea so lonely. Night falls over the quiet town. Sitting alone in the street, Hirotaka wonders what to do now that his companions have abandoned him. Since they took his armor and money, the only thing he still owns is this bag of junk. Just thinking about it makes him chuckle. Honestly, starting a new life as a penniless outcast is actually a pretty impressive mess. He realizes moping won't help, so he decides to put his old skills to work. Digging through his bags, he listens to the metal clinking as he searches for something useful. He spreads the loot across the alley floor and starts figuring out which parts might fit together. When he picks up a battered piece of armor, he wonders about the person who owned it before it ended up in a trash pile. Still, he figures this old scrap has probably seen more of the world than he has. He spots old bloodstains on the metal, realizing this piece of junk likely came from a real battlefield. Even though it was tossed aside like garbage, he respects how long it lasted. Age doesn't bother him because he sees the life left in it. To him, the history and memories attached to an object never really fade away. Looking up at the night sky, he decides he's actually glad he ended up with this skill. The others can laugh all they want, but he loves finding the stories hidden in the world's trash. Looking for some quick cash, he finds a quiet shop on the edge of town. A bell chimes as he pushes the door open and steps inside. He carries his heavy bags to the front and asks if they're buying today. After placing his haul on the counter, he wonders if they take more than just basic supplies. The shopkeeper peers into the sack and seems completely baffled by what he's seeing. Hirotaka's heart sinks as he realizes the man might reject his whole collection. Suddenly, he snaps, lecturing the shopkeeper about how calling things trash is just narrow-minded prejudice. The shopkeeper blinks, looking past the lecture to notice how neatly the items are sorted. He asks if Hirotaka actually took the time to break everything down into raw materials himself. Rubbing his neck, the kid admits he did, thinking they'd be easier to reuse that way. The man explains that disassembling equipment takes a lot more strength and technical knowledge than most people realize. He gives a grin, impressed that a young guy can handle such a meticulous job. Hirotaka just laughs it off, quietly reminding himself that he's actually 32 on the inside. Then comes the real payoff when the owner offers 6 silver coins, which is a lot higher than the standard price. Stunned by the luck, Hirotaka beams and shouts a huge thank you. He steps out of the shop and back into the street, feeling a lot lighter with actual coins in his pocket. Taking in the sights of the bustling square, he realizes that being on his own isn't so scary after all. Hirotaka figures that just living his life and collecting junk might actually be a pretty sweet deal. No quotas and no annoying bosses means he can finally just relax and enjoy the freedom. That feeling of total freedom doesn't last long, though, as the fine print of his power starts to sink in. Sitting alone in the woods, he admits his skill has a massive drawback. He can only use it once every 24 hours. One piece of trash a day isn't exactly a get-rich-quick scheme, and he starts wondering if his old party was right about him being dead weight. He eventually gives up on the legendary loot for now and starts picking basic medicinal herbs just to earn some pocket change. Just as he's getting into a rhythm with the weeds, a sudden rustle in the nearby grass catches his attention. A tiny, fluffy mouse pops out of the brush, looking completely harmless. Hirotaka relaxes and smiles, thinking the little guy is actually pretty cute. That peaceful vibe disappears when the mouse screeches and shows off a mouth full of jagged fangs. Before he can even process the change, a whole pack of the snarling creatures leaps from the shadows to join the hunt. Panicking, he turns and bolts through the woods with the swarm nipping at his heels. It hits him that he completely forgot about monsters existing because he always let his old party handle the combat. He curses his luck, realizing he's completely defenseless against a whole pack of monsters. Just as things look bleak, a notification pings in the corner of his vision. 12 hours have finally passed, meaning his skill is off cooldown right when he needs it most. He throws his hand up and shouts that it's finally ready. Desperation sets in as he prays for anything, even a rusty old sword, just to give him a fighting chance. Reaching out, he activates waste item recovery, hoping for a miracle to pop out of thin air. A dark, jagged energy suddenly tears through the air right in front of his face. It slams into the ground with a burst of black smoke that looks way too intense for a simple gathering skill. Staring in disbelief, he freezes on the spot as the strange shadowy energy starts swirling around his hand. The dark mist quickly solidifies in his grip, leaving him holding a jagged black dagger that looks more like a curse than a weapon. He stares at the blade in a daze, barely able to believe his own eyes. With strange vein-like patterns and a creepy eye carved into the hilt, the thing doesn't look like a normal tool at all. Sweat drips down his face while he looks at the weapon in disbelief. Staring at the mark, he wonders what on earth he just summoned. He doesn't have much time to wonder, though, because the pack is already closing in from every angle. Gripping the strange handle tight, he watches the creatures prepare to lunge. With a desperate shout, he swings the blade in a wide, frantic arc as to keep them back. Instead of a simple metal strike, black energy slashes erupt through the air and shred the monsters instantly. He just stands there in total shock, realizing this tiny dagger is way more dangerous than he thought. He looks around at the sudden silence, seeing monster corpses scattered all over the clearing. The few survivors scramble back into the grass, clearly wanting nothing to do with him anymore. Taking a shaky breath, he finally lets out a sigh of relief now that the danger has passed. He admits the dagger's power is unreal, especially since it sliced through those monsters like paper. Since his skill only pulls from literal trash piles, he starts wondering why anyone would ever throw this away. He just stares at the blade in silence, trying to wrap his head around the strange weapon he now owns. Looking at the creepy eye on the hilt, he realizes just how gross the design actually is. Even if it looks cursed, he figures it's his lifesaver and gives it a little thanks. It hits him that the monsters he just took down are basically piles of extra income. Humming to himself, he gathers the bodies up and starts feeling pretty lucky for once. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream cuts through the air and makes him freeze in his tracks. He scans the trees, trying to figure out exactly where that noise came from. Thinking someone is in trouble, he panics and immediately wonders if there is a real adventurer nearby to handle this. Then it hits him that he is the only person for miles, meaning he is the only one who can help. He finds a massive, one-eyed bear cornering a girl named Clarice. She trembles and grips her staff as the beast looms over her, easily twice her size. Stuttering, Clarice warns the beast not to come any closer, though her voice is shaking too much to sound convincing. The bear doesn't care about the threat, staring her down with cold, murderous intent. As it finally lunges with a deafening roar, she can only scream and brace for the end. Just then, Hirotaka dives between them and blocks the massive claws with his new dagger. He grinds his teeth against the weight of the beast, barely holding back the snap of its jaws. She stares at him in silent disbelief, frozen as he takes the brunt of the attack. Giving her a quick smile, he admits he's just glad he arrived in time. Before they can even talk, the monster lunges again with a terrifying roar. Sent flying by the force of its swing, he skids across the dirt until he hits the ground hard. He ends up face down in the leaves, feeling the insane power of the strike rattle his bones. Staring up at the beast's gnashing teeth, he realizes these isekai bears are way more dangerous than any forest rat. He hits the dirt, seeing nothing but a wall of fur as the monster moves in for the kill. Clarice watches from just a few feet away, completely frozen while the beast towers over him. Staring straight up, he can barely process the danger as his heart hammers against his ribs. She tells herself to move, but her legs refuse to listen. It is a clear mismatch, leaving her feeling helpless against such a massive mountain of muscle. Her hands shake so hard that her staff starts rattling, the wood clicking together in the tense silence. Pale and trembling, she can only watch as things go from bad to worse. She stares ahead with wide, vacant eyes, her mind spiraling into a dark place. Clarice starts blaming herself for being useless every time things actually get dangerous, figuring she does nothing but cause trouble. Memories of her failures flood back, like the time she apologized to her teacher for being a talentless student. Recalling her grandfather, She cringes at how her messy healing magic only made his back pain worse. Tears well up as she realizes her clumsiness might get a complete stranger killed, and she decides she's just trash who's destined to die here. Just then, a calm voice cuts through the panic, telling her everything is going to be fine. He drops into a crouch and promises to handle the situation himself. Clarice just stares, unable to process his sudden confidence. Narrowing his eyes, he focuses on the massive weight pinning him down. Grabbing a firm hold of the beast, he braces himself to fight back. Suddenly, he lets out a heavy grunt and uses the raw muscle he built from years of hauling heavy trash to shove the Jimbear backward. He warns the monster not to underestimate the strength he built from collecting trash as it stumbles away. He follows through on his threat by slamming a heavy strike right into the bear's jaw. The force of the blow shakes the beast's entire head. Its single eye opens wide as the realization of his strength finally hits home. Suddenly, the monster erupts into a furious roar and lunges forward for a counterattack. Realizing that raw strength won't be enough to finish this, he reaches for the dark dagger. He lunges forward and slashes at the beast's neck with everything he's got. Fighting it with a pocket knife is a losing battle since he can't get close enough to land a real blow. The blade connects, but it barely leaves a mark on the thick fur. Gritting his teeth, he notices the cut is way too shallow to slow the monster down. Desperate for an edge, he finds himself wishing the weapon was just a little bit longer. Suddenly, the handle starts to squirm and pulsate like it's actually alive. Staring in shock, he watches the metal transform right in his grip. The small dagger stretches into a jagged blade, becoming a full-size sword right in his hands. He's stunned, barely able to process that his piece of junk just evolved. Looking closer, he realizes the hilt is covered in actual, blinking eyeballs that are staring right back at him. It's way creepier than a normal weapon, leaving him wondering if this thing even counts as a sword. Before he can wrap his head around the gross design, the Jimbear lunges forward with a deafening roar. With the beast closing in, he has to snap out of it immediately. He whips the massive blade around in a single, desperate arc. Cutting deep through the monster's fur, the metal finally finds its mark. The blade slices through the beast with terrifying ease, splitting the massive creature in half in a single motion. He stands there frozen, barely able to process the destruction he just caused with a weapon he found in the trash. With his eyes wide, he just looks at the empty space where the bear once was. The two massive halves of the beast simply slide apart and thud onto the grass. Watching from the back, Clarice stands frozen, unable to look away from what she just saw. His gaze stays fixed on the ground as he struggles to process what his own hands just did. A quiet whisper escapes her lips as she calls the feat amazing. Wiping sweat from his face, he realizes a single strike did more than his brute strength ever could. When he looks at the hilt, he sees the weapon is still shifting, with several creepy eyeballs staring right back at him. It's clear this isn't just some lucky piece of junk. This sword is seriously dangerous. Instead of being creeped out, he looks at the blade with total excitement, figuring the jagged design is actually pretty cool. Peering closer at the hilt, he starts to wonder what he's actually holding. While he's distracted by the details, the blade starts leaking a strange, dark smoke. He just watches in silence as the aura thickens and starts to take shape. Suddenly, the mist explodes into a massive screen of runes floating in the air. The text identifies the weapon as the magic sword Osoro, revealing it's already at level 8. While he mumbles the name to himself, Clarice watches from the side, looking like she's finally found her voice. She finally finds the words, thanking him with tears in her eyes for jumping in to save her. Bowing low, she starts apologizing for dragging him into such a mess, though he quickly waves his hands to tell her it's fine. He gives her a warm smile, explaining that he's just glad he could help out. A quiet beat passes while she looks down, clearly moved by how kind he is. Suddenly noticing his condition, she offers to use her healing magic to fix him up. When he looks surprised, she reminds him that she really is a cleric after all. She starts a formal prayer, calling out to the Holy Mother while Hirotaka watches with high expectations. He leans in, figuring he is about to witness a real high-level miracle. As she reaches the peak of the chant, Her expression starts to wobble. Suddenly her eyes go into a dizzy spiral. Instead of a healing light, she just lets out a loud, miserable gag right in the middle of the forest. It's a complete disaster that kills the mood instantly. Shaking with embarrassment, she immediately bursts into tears and starts apologizing for the failure. She slumps over in total defeat, muttering about how she really is just useless trash who can't do anything right. She starts comparing herself to a low-grade potion, crying that a cleric who can't heal has zero value. Apparently, her nerves are so bad she can't even finish a chant if someone is watching her. Hirotaka just stands there for a moment, letting her spiral while the forest remains silent. Then, he just bluntly agrees with her, saying she's right. This total lack of sugarcoating makes her flinch in shock. He leans in close, asking her to give the healing magic another shot. Still caught off guard, she lets out a startled squeak while trying to make sense of the request. He explains that she only gets this tense because she cares so much about being useful and meeting expectations. Standing by the fallen bear, he thanks her for worrying about his injury in the first place. To him, that kind heart is the best medicine he could ask for. He asks her to try one more time, insisting that even a failed attempt would cheer him up. Her eyes widen as she processes the idea that failing might actually be okay. He keeps a steady, gentle smile to show he really means it. Clutching her staff to her chest, she admits that nobody has ever said something so kind to her before. Determined to live up to his expectations, she raises her staff and begins a formal prayer to the Holy Mother. He waits in silence, watching as she carefully channels her mana into the wood. This time her focus is absolute as she calls for a pure light to end his suffering. With a final shout, the forest fills with a brilliant flash of successful magic. The strange warmth of the spell finally washes over him, and he looks down at his hands in surprise. He rubs his skin in disbelief, noticing that it feels incredibly smooth after the spell. Clarice watches him with a shaky smile, still looking a bit overwhelmed that her magic actually worked. Grinning, Hirotaka tells her he knew she could do it and holds up his hand for a high five. She stares at his palm in surprise, seemingly shocked by the gesture. Finally tapping her hand against his, she beams with a look of pure relief. She looks genuinely thrilled, beaming with joy now that she finally got her magic to work. Watching her, he can't help but think she looks pretty cute when she's not panicking. Once things settle down, he realizes they still haven't swapped names and asks who she is. Lizch is her name, and he introduces himself as Hirotaka, finally making things official. The mood shifts when she notices the strange weapon in his hand and asks where he got it. After he explains he just found it, her face goes pale with terror. She stammers out the name Osoro, asking if he's really the owner of a legendary demon sword. He just blinks at her, having no idea why she's suddenly looking at him like he's a monster. Liz explains that owning a demon sword is basically the mark of a demon king. He just stands there with a totally blank look, barely managing a confused huh as the news flies right over his head. While he stays clueless, the scene shifts far away to a spiky, dark castle where a heavy vibration starts shaking the ground. Inside the throne room, a stern voice demands to know if they heard correctly. He can't believe they actually lost the legendary demon sword. One figure starts laughing hysterically, mocking the demon king of sloth for being so careless. He warns that someone named Tristan is going to be a nightmare to deal with once he finds out. Sweating bullets, the one who dropped the ball insists it wasn't a simple mistake. He shouts that the sword was stolen, not lost. That excuse doesn't seem to make Tristan feel any better. He stands there like a mountain, slamming a fist into his palm with a look that promises trouble. Below him, Gisela is curled up and shaking, realizing her boss is about to lose his patience. He stands tall, his silhouette filling the room with a heavy pressure, looking down at the others. He reminds them that a demon king should be stronger and freer than anyone else. Gisela can only offer a weak, panicked stutter as he turns his cold gaze toward her, spitting out that anyone pathetic enough to let their sword get stolen, and even worthy of the name. A single, sharp eye glares from the shadows as he barks for her to get moving right now. Gisela doesn't even get a second to argue before she's blasted right out of the castle wall. Tristan's voice booms after her, ordering her to go find the trash demon king immediately. Meanwhile, a small figure drifts lazily through the sky, looking completely exhausted by the effort of existing. The demon king of Sloth finds this whole situation a massive pain and wonders who would even bother stealing her sword. Her eyes stay half closed, but she calmly promises to hunt down the thief and kill them herself. Meanwhile, Lisa starts putting things together while they walk through town. She realizes he only has that sword because he found it by chance, admitting she was actually starting to get worried. After thinking it over, she tells him it's obvious. There's just no way he could be a demon king. Hirotaka stays quiet, though the weight of that title seems to be stuck in his head. As they walk through the town, he thinks about how he was originally brought to this world. His whole mission is to defeat 7 demon kings who are wrecking the peace, even if that feels like a pretty tall order. Glancing over at Lizette, he asks if these guys are actually as bad as the stories claim. She doesn't sugarcoat it, explaining that bad doesn't even cover it since they've wiped out entire nations. Apparently, that terrifying power comes from a contract with a demon sword, which acts as their mark of authority. Hearing this, he starts to realize just how much trouble his new weapon might bring. Still, he just gives a small smile and figures that getting kicked out was probably a blessing in disguise. As they walk through the quiet streets, Lizette stops and calls out to him. She stares at the jagged blade in his hand, wondering what he actually plans to do with a weapon of that caliber. While she thinks about the dark legends of people using such power for their own greed, her expression turns a bit uneasy. Looking down at the metal, Hirotaka admits that having something this strong makes it feel like anything is possible. He suddenly looks up with a spark in his eye and tells her he has finally made a decision. He has decided to treasure the blade, holding it up with a gentle smile as he tells her he wants to take care of it properly. She just blinks at him, her eyes wide with confusion over the idea of being kind to a legendary evil weapon. Looking back on his loneliest moments, he explains that Osoro has already saved him twice when no one else would. He holds the blade up high, calling it his partner and vowing to take care of it from now on. Lisa watches him closely, her expression shifting as she processes his sincere words. She starts to think he is actually a pretty incredible person. This pure attitude completely changes how she views the demon sword, making the terrifying weapon seem a lot less scary. Turning toward him with a fresh smile, she offers to help him using her healing magic and the knowledge her teacher passed down. She figures she can change for the better too. She squeezes her fists and finally asks if she can travel with him as a companion. Closing her eyes tight, she shouts that she will do anything for him as long as she can help. Instead of the warm welcome she expected, Hirotaka gives her a flat no and shuts her down immediately. She stands there looking completely baffled, arguing that being partners is all about helping each other out. Pointing a thumb at his chest, Hirotaka clarifies his point. He wants her to rely on him just as much as he relies on her. While they continue down the road, he admits he's just an unemployed guy with a low-tier skill who might be a burden. She reaches out and firmly grips his hand, refusing to let him talk himself down. She tells him his junk collection skill in a curse it's a way to find things others have abandoned. Looking up at him with a soft smile, she says it's actually a very kind and wonderful power. Stunned, he just stares at her while he processes the compliment. She gives his hand another firm squeeze to drive the point home. Finally, Hirotaka looks away with a small smile and thanks her. At the Adventure Guild, the receptionist takes one look at Hirotaka's status and screams that he is unemployed. While he and Lisa freeze in shock, the cat girl looks weirdly thrilled as she grabs his arm to announce his jobless status again. Without warning, she starts hauling him across the floor at high speed, showing off some terrifying strength. She zips him toward the back of the building while Lisa just watches the dust settle. She finally stops and drops him face first at a desk, chirping that they have officially arrived. She calls the place the White Cat's Roost, though it looks more like a cozy cottage than a grand adventure hall. Turns out, she's actually the guild master of this humble little spot. Leaning in way too close, she asks if they're looking for work and invites them to sign up on the spot. The cat girl beams at them through her thick glasses and introduces herself as Lorna. They look up at the grand building she's talking about, which serves as a hub for monster hunting and taking on odd jobs to earn a living. Standing there in a daze, they both repeat the word guild in disbelief. Once they actually step inside, the room is dead quiet and looks pretty empty. Hirotaka takes it all in, wondering if this is really the right place. Looking around the empty hall, he wonders if any requests even make it to a place this quiet. The receptionist claims business is booming, though he isn't really buying it. A long silence hangs in the air as they wait for any sign of life. Not a single sound follows. Sensing his doubt, she offers a bonus, a free room upstairs if they register right now. Lisa looks surprised, wondering if they're actually being invited to stay for good. The receptionist happily explains they have plenty of space since there aren't any other members around. Leaning in close, she asks unemployed San if he likes the deal, making him snap that his name is Hirotaka. After getting that out of the way, he finally agrees to register. Hearing the news, the receptionist starts cheering at the top of her lungs, yelling about his lack of a job like it's a badge of honor. Just watching her makes him feel tired, especially with how much she's bouncing around. Even so, she suddenly stops to ask if he's really okay with joining such a run-down guild. He reminds her that she's the one who brought it up, but as he looks around, he realizes the place is actually pretty well kept. A free bed in a clean room is a total win in his book. He wonders if they're recruiting so hard because this guild actually means something to them. Thinking out loud, he adds that a place cherished by its people is bound to be a good one. The receptionist just stands there in silence as her face starts to redden. Suddenly, she snaps out of it and shouts a massive thank you with a giant grin. She warns him that quitting isn't an option, holding up a surprisingly detailed and very embarrassing sketch of him. It turns out the guild master has some serious drawing skills, and the receptionist threatens to plaster these pictures all over town if he tries to run. Once the artistic blackmail is over, she sets down their new guild cards and confirms the registration is complete. He thanks her and turns to Lisa, wondering if she's actually okay with him picking a place so impulsively. She smiles warmly, telling him she's happy to follow his lead. Still, as she looks over the paperwork, she can't help but feel like she's heard this guild's name somewhere before. Hirotaka holds up his official card, looking at his own face and the E-rank symbol stamped on the front. He stares at it for a long moment, finally realizing that he's really an adventurer now. Grinning, he thinks about how he never could have done this alone, but having his new friends by his side makes the whole thing feel pretty exciting. As they finish up, the receptionist looks at Lisa's registration form and her eyes go wide with a sudden realization. Scanning the page, she sees the name Lisa Montagna and a special skill called the Blessing of Chakra. With a nervous gulp, she starts putting it all together, figuring that her family name is way too familiar to be a coincidence. Suddenly, she points a finger and yells that Lisa is actually the daughter of the local lord. Lisa freezes, her face going pale as she begs the cat girl to just treat her like a normal traveling cleric. Seeing the panic, Lorna nods along and promises to keep the secret under wraps for now. Behind that helpful smile, her mind starts racing with dollar signs. She figures that helping a noble could lead to lower taxes or extra guild funding down the road. While she giggles over the potential payday, Hirotaka just stands there, wondering why she's acting so creepy. Lorna eventually snaps back to reality and asks what they want to call their official party. Blinking in surprise, he repeats the words like he never even considered it. She explains that most adventurers pick a name based on their group's vibe or their ultimate goal. Some squads go for something cute, while others are more honest, like the group of businessmen literally named Give Me Money. While Hirotaka ponders their own philosophy, Lorna suggests aiming for a healthy, ethical work environment with 3-day weekends. She is secretly hoping he'll work every single day to help the guild grow, though. Lisa just stands there with a blank stare as the background fills with random slogans about labor rights and protesting against evil corporations. She starts thinking back to when Hirotaka told her it was okay to fail. She remembers how much those words meant to her when she was feeling useless. With that memory in mind, she finally speaks up and suggests they name the party the characters, the other to just look at her in silence for a second. Suddenly, her face turns bright red as the weight of her sentimental suggestion finally sinks in. Shaking her head frantically, she begs them to just ignore her and pick something less cheesy. Hirotaka, in listening to her protests at all, shouting that the name is actually perfect. Striking a confident pose, he officially declares the formation of their new party, the characters. While he celebrates with his fists pumped, she just stands there with her staff, looking completely stunned that he actually went through with it. He flashes a confident thumbs up, promising to show the world the true spirit of their new team. Lisa stares back with sparkling eyes, actually looking a little moved by how much he believes in them. The mood shifts when Lorna starts shouting that the entire guild's future is riding on his shoulders. Even with that heavy burden, he strikes a pose and vows to work his tail off so they can afford to eat. But after all that big talk, he decides to start the actual work tomorrow, leaving everyone to faceplant in disappointment. The sun comes up on a brand new day, and he's finally ready to get moving. He gives himself a quick pep talk, feeling pumped for their first official mission. Inside the guild, the girls watch closely as he mentions wanting to test a skill before the quest begins. Stretching out his hand, he focuses and triggers his signature power, character. Lorna admits she's never even heard of a skill like this, despite all the registration data she usually handles. Lisa and Lorna watch closely, curious to see if he can actually pull rare items out of thin air. Standing in the center of the guild, he gives them a confident grin and says he feels a big one coming. All three of them lean in with huge eyes as the energy starts to swirl around his palm. Then, with a sudden pop, the skill finally activates and something begins to materialize. Out of nowhere, a pair of frilly panties drops right into his hands. He just stands there holding them out, his eyes wide and his mouth hanging open in complete shock. Staring at the tiny bow on the front, he looks like his whole world just shattered. He shuts his eyes in pure shame, probably wishing he could just vanish along with the floating laundry. The girls just stand there in frozen silence, staring at the frilly mess with wide eyes. Waving his hands in a total panic, he insists the skill has a mind of its own and this wasn't intentional. Then, a dusty scrap of paper suddenly slides out of the fabric while he's holding it. Lisa watches the paper flutter through the air, wondering what else his power might have tucked away. Kneeling down, she peers at the dirty parchment resting on the wooden floor. He rushes over to see what it is, desperately hoping for a comeback after that embarrassing summon. Lisa looks over the parchment and realizes it's actually a treasure map, much to Hirotaka's relief. Pointing to the landmarks, she mentions a legend about a famous wizard's tomb in a valley south of town. Her eyes light up as she shows off the big X and the handwritten note that says the treasure is right here. Hirotaka stares at the map in silence. Visions of overflowing treasure chests and piles of gold coins instantly fill his head. Getting a wild look in his eyes, he pumps his fists and shouts that they absolutely have to go find it. Lisa watches him geek out while the receptionist stands there looking completely baffled by his sudden energy. When the cat girl tries to remind him they have actual guild work to do, he doesn't even blink. He just gives her a grin, arguing that bringing back legendary loot would be the best possible advertisement for the guild anyway. Lorna finally caves, telling them to find that treasure even if it costs them their lives. Quickly correcting herself, she adds that staying alive is actually the top priority. Examining the map closely, Lisa notices some dark, crusty stains on the paper. It looks like blood, making her wonder if the last person who held this ended up as monster food. Hirotaka keeps things light, insisting they'll be fine as long as they have his power and her support. If things get too dangerous, He figures they can just make a run for it. He shouts that the plan is set, clearly ready to get moving. Staging a hero pose, he points toward Eureka Valley while Lorna cheers him on. Lisa just watches with a nervous look, still clutching that blood-stained map. They finally set off for the Tomb of Kion, a massive valley hidden between towering cliffs and waterfalls. They stop in their tracks, staring up with wide eyes at the massive structure, built right into the cliffside. The entrance features a giant stone arch with a door that's already cracked open. As Lisa notes, it looks more like impressive ruins than a simple grave. Hirotaka admits his expectations for the treasure are higher than ever. Before they head deeper, Lisa notices the new scabbard he's wearing for his magic sword. He mentions it was a special order from the tool shop, imagining the blacksmith giving him a proud thumbs up for the custom piece. The weapon starts rattling against his hip. It gets a laugh out of Hirotaka, who asks if it's happy with its new home. He's still chuckling to himself, totally unaware of the massive, snarling skeleton monster looming right over his shoulder. Behind him, the creature's bony jaws start to clatter as it prepares to strike. Lisa lets out a terrified shriek, yelling that it's a skeleton monster, while Hirotaka finally notices and joins in on the screaming. Just as quickly as he started panicking, he goes quiet and looks almost bored once he realizes it's just a standard monster. Still, Lisa snaps at him to stop being so calm when they're about to get eaten. The monster certainly seems ready to do just that, looming over them with a bone-chilling roar. While Lisa is busy screaming her head off, he doesn't even flinch. Staring straight into its empty sockets, he lets his playful mood vanish as he finally gets serious. Suddenly, he draws his blade and shatters the creature into 100 flying pieces, proving that giant threat was just a pile of junk. Bones rattle onto the stone floor as Lisa stares at the mess, realizing the skeleton didn't stand a chance. She tells him how amazing he is, so he just flashes a peace sign with a relaxed grin. Just as things settle, a strange, dark aura starts bubbling up from the pile of debris. Looking closer, he sees a floating notification revealing his new skill, turning those remains into a rotten sword. This new skill is called Undead Attribute Bestowal, and he isn't exactly sure what to make of it. Lisa admits she has never heard of it either, but the name suggests it might actually keep enemies from dying. Scratching his head, he wonders why on earth he would want to make his targets immortal in the middle of a dungeon. Since it sounds pretty useless, he decides he probably won't even bother using it. Just then, the sword itself starts to warp and growl with a creepy grin, almost like it's offended by his dismissal. It suddenly elongates into a massive black blade, complete with a gnarly skull guard that looks like it's staring right at him. Hirotaka just stands there holding the thing, looking more confused than intimidated by his new weapon. Up close, the skull hilt looks pretty fierce, showing off its jagged teeth and a hollow, glowing eye. Despite the size, he starts swinging the blade around like it weighs nothing at all. Lisa wonders if the sword is just in a growth spurt, watching him wave the giant slab of metal back and forth. He realizes the sword might actually be outclassing him, so he figures it's probably time to start hitting the gym more. Just as he's thinking about training, a bare foot steps onto the grass as a voice tells him there's no need for any of that. Both he and Lisa freeze on the spot, realizing they aren't alone anymore. Reaching a hand out toward them, the stranger calmly explains they're both about to be turned into piles of charcoal. Hirotaka quickly snaps into a combat stance, but Lisa is already screaming a warning about a massive surge of magic. Then, everything disappears behind a blinding white flash. When the glare clears, a woman in tattered rags stands before them, telling them it is time to give up. She reveals herself as the Sloth Demon Lord, reaching out with a hand crackling with energy. Hirotaka freezes on the spot, staring up in total silence. Beside him, Lisa looks just as stunned, her eyes wide as she tries to wrap her head around seeing a demon lord in person. She leans in and yells for them to surrender, loudly announcing herself as the Demon King of Sloth. Despite the intense declaration, the two groups just stand there in a long, awkward silence. Hirotaka whispers to Lisa that he honestly ain't sure how to handle this, especially since her clothes are barely hanging on. Blank-faced, Lisa admits she isn't even sure if they are looking at a monster or just a very loud, messy girl. Rachel doesn't seem to care about the confusion, demanding they tell her who they are first. She sticks out a hand and declares she's actually an elf on a quest to take down the Demon King. Just then, her eyes lock onto the massive skull sword Hirotaka is holding, realizing it's a demonic weapon. Since he's carrying something so evil, she decides he must be the real monster and rushes in for the kill. Hirotaka panics and shoves his guild card forward, desperately trying to prove they are just rookies. Ignoring his plea, Rachel raises her hand and begins a high-level incantation to summon a fire spirit. Lisa watches with her jaw dropped, sensing the heavy vibration of mana in the air. She realizes this isn't just basic magic, but a high-level spell meant to incinerate everything in its path. She lets out a final shout, looking ready to wipe them off the map. Paralyzed with fear, he can only stand there and watch, certain his journey is about to end. Suddenly, her eyes roll back and she starts swaying like a tree in the wind. Instead of a massive explosion, she just drops and face plants right into the middle of the street. Muffled groans start coming from the pavement as she stays pinned to the ground. While the duo watches in total confusion, a thunderous growl erupts from her stomach. Closing her eyes, she admits that she is just starving and can't move a muscle. Hirotaka hands over some bread, and she looks genuinely relieved as she starts eating. Between bites, she thanks him for the meal and admits she feels bad for doubting that he was actually an adventurer. As the group sits together on the cobblestones, he reminds her that he tried to tell her that from the start. Chewing away, she mentions that even though she didn't find the Demon King, finding that demonic sword he's carrying is still a huge win. He and Lisa just watch her, remembering that her name is Rachel. Her quest to defeat the Demon King feels a bit ironic considering she's the one currently being taken care of by a rookie. She looks away with a somber expression, mentioning how much suffering the Demon Kings have brought to the world. Hearing her talk about more monsters makes Hirotaka go quiet as he realizes there is more than one out there. Despite the heavy conversation, Rachel continues to plow through his rations without a second thought. Tears well up in his eyes as he stares at his empty bag, realizing she even finished the snacks he was saving. The priestess explains that food is how she recovers mana, which explains why she needed every single one of those snacks. Hearing that, he watches her with a blank expression, wondering if she's actually as amazing as she says. She catches their looks and smirks, bragging that she's actually the legendary magician Kain. The girl's eyes go wide as she asks if this means they're actually blood-related. But after a quick look at the family tree, it turns out she's just a disciple of a great-grandchild, basically a total stranger. She then mentions she's actually a former S-rank adventurer. Hearing this, Hirotaka wonders why she didn't just lead with that. He asks where her team is, since most people don't wander dungeons alone. Her expression goes quiet, her eyes hidden in the shadows. Dropping her gaze, she explains that the group broke up long ago. She figures having weak people around just adds to the body count. As she stares into the fire, she tells them she doesn't need any companions for this trip. They both look pretty stunned by her blunt attitude. She warns them to turn back now, explaining that the monsters deeper in these ruins are incredibly dangerous. A cold wind whistles through the dark entrance behind her, making the threat feel very real. She glances at her torn clothes and admits those same monsters even stole all her equipment. Hirotaka stares at her in silence as the realization hits him. He tells her he honestly thought she was just some weirdo because of her outfit. She snaps at that, slamming the ground and shouting that she has actually suffered a great humiliation. Looking horrified, the priestess can't believe what she's hearing while Hirotaka just waits for the rest of the story. Rachel explains how the monster's undead hands pinned her down, slowly stripping her gear away piece by piece. Before the story gets any weirder, Hirotaka yells at her to stop because the details are getting way too graphic. Blinking at the outburst, she remarks that he has a cute face but a surprisingly sharp tongue. As they sit around a small fire, she admits she's surprised he even made it out alive. He just closes his eyes with a confident look and tells her there's nothing to worry about. With a smug grin, he claims he survived because he's actually scarier than any monster in the dungeon. Ignoring his bragging, she asks what kind of special abilities that demonic sword actually has. Her expression turns serious as she explains that 7 of these demonic swords are scattered around the world. Still, Hirotaka scratches his head and admits he isn't totally sure, though he thinks it absorbs powers from enemies he defeats. Rachel processes this, noting that an ability to recover powers means the weapon only gets tougher with every battle. Watching her closely, Hirotaka looks a bit unsettled by her sudden change in tone. She stands tall amidst the debris, staring off into the distance as her hair catches the wind. Sensing the shift in the air, Hirotaka can only whisper her name. That silence gives way to a memory of a town in ruins, where panicked villagers scream about a demon king and beg for someone to save them. Rachel covers her ears and screams, trying to drown out the sounds of the dying town. Though she is hailed as a genius mage, the sheer terror of the moment leaves her completely paralyzed. Standing amidst the ruins, she looks at the carnage and realizes she was the only one who could have stopped this. She blames herself for the bodies in the streets, convinced they died because she was too scared to move. Voices from the past ring in her head, demanding that a genius like her should be out there fighting. Her eyes go wide and hollow as she decides that if she isn't fulfilling her role, she simply has no value at all. It is a memory she still can't ignore, even years later. She snaps out of the memory and stares him down with a haunting intensity, warning that the demonic sword will eventually destroy him. When Hirotaka looks at her, he freezes on the spot, unable to process the sudden change in her tone. Standing tall in the ruins, she demands he hand the weapon over immediately so this doesn't end up being his last adventure. His eyes go wide as the weight of her threat finally sinks in. Instead of letting go, he grips the hilt even tighter, refusing to back down. He flatly refuses to hand the weapon over, staring her down with total defiance. Seeing his resolve, Rachel's gaze turns cold and serious. She begins a low chant, calling out to Undine, the great spirit of water. As the mana begins to gather, Hirotaka watches in shock, realizing she isn't holding back anymore. Massive torrents of water suddenly erupt, and he grabs the young priestess, yelling for her to run for it. Coldly, Rachel commands the spirit to wash away the foolish invaders standing in her way. A massive sphere of water begins to swirl in front of her, condensing into a heavy, dangerous mass. Pressure builds in the air as she keeps her eyes fixed on her targets. Reaching out toward them, she calmly calls out for her water arrow. The spell strikes with a deafening crash, throwing debris everywhere while he dives to shield the girl with his own body. Huddled against the stone wall, they both wait for the dust to settle. Still, he just stares at the destruction, barely finding the words to complain. Hirotaka looks over the massive cave entrance she just carved into the mountain and admits this is getting way too dangerous. Realizing they're in over their heads, he asks the priestess if she can still run. She gives him a shaky nod, and the two of them start booking it as fast as they can. Far behind them, Rachel just stands in the middle of the dust, completely alone. Her eyes are cold and her clothes are in shreds, making her look more like a ghost than a legendary mage. Hirotaka and the girl put some distance between themselves and that chilling sight, finally stopping deep in the ruins to catch their breath. Gasping for air, she notes that they've made it pretty far. He nods, figuring the smoke from the blast gave them just enough cover to slip away. Since they have a moment of peace, he suggests they find a place to hide and regroup. But, as he scans the room, he spots something that definitely doesn't belong in a dusty dungeon: a massive, juicy hunk of cooked meat sitting right on a plate. It's comically huge, sitting right there in the middle of the stone floor without a soul in sight. Wiping his mouth, Hirotaka looks clearly tempted by how good it smells despite the weird situation. The priestess warns him that finding fresh food here makes zero sense and has to be a dungeon trap. Laughing it off, He agrees that nobody would be foolish enough to actually take the bait. As they get closer, they realize someone already did. Rachel is buried waist deep in the roast, tearing into it like a wild animal. Hirotaka stands there with his mouth hanging open, wondering how she even got ahead of them just to have a snack. Suddenly, a jagged crack of energy rips through the air. It strikes the table with a deafening boom, sending Rachel leaping back to safety just in time. Hirotaka yells out in a panic, asking what is even happening anymore. The meat is completely gone, leaving the group standing in the middle of a silent, empty room. Rachel quickly drops her guard and tells the group to get ready, calling for an immediate truce. Narrowing her eyes, she makes it clear that a ceasefire is their only option if they want to survive. Hirotaka just stares at her in total confusion, unable to process why she's suddenly acting like an ally. She points into the darkness, identifying the figure standing there as the monster that stripped and humiliated her. He turns pale as he finally sees the threat, his body locking up from the pressure in the air. A massive white looms over the group, a four-armed skeleton with three skulls fused together. It wears heavy robes covered in carvings while gripping several magic staves. This is the monster that humiliated Rachel before, and the pressure it gives off is suffocating. It's a high-ranking mage brought back through necromancy. Seeing the danger, the priestess warns them to stay sharp since it can cast massive spells. Hirotaka just stands there, sweating as he realizes the scale of the power in front of them. But Rachel is mostly just furious. She shouts that the creature tried to trap her with illusions again, making Hirotaka wonder how she managed to fall for the same trick twice. Screaming about her stolen equipment, she charges forward to take it all back. A massive shockwave rocks the entire chamber, sending deep cracks through the stone floor. Shielding their eyes, Hirotaka and the girl watch in disbelief as the raw power levels everything in its path. He figures the white won't stand a chance after a hit like that, but he knows they can't just stand there and wait. As sparks crackle in the air, he tells the girl they need to make their move while the monster is still reeling. But the plan goes south immediately when a massive bolt of lightning blasts Rachel, sending her screaming as it tears through the air. Hirotaka calls out to her, his face pale as he watches the girl take the full force of the hit. As the smoke clears, he stands there in total disbelief. Emerging from the haze, the white looks completely untouched, looming over them like a nightmare that won't end. He sprints over to make sure she is still in one piece. Gritting her teeth, she admits she forgot a pretty major detail: the robe the monster stole can actually nullify all magic. Without her magic to protect her, she looks completely helpless as the monster towers over her. It looms there like a nightmare, trapping her on the ground while it prepares a final strike. Sparks begin to crackle around its skeletal jaws as it charges up a point-blank blast. Unable to move, she just stares up in shock while the lightning dances across her skin. Someone calls out her name, but she is far too stunned to even react. The white looms over her, ready to end things with one final, crushing blow. But just as it swings, Hirotaka leaps into the fray, putting himself right between Rachel and certain death. Winding up a massive punch, he lets loose a strike that glows with a strange, dark power. The impact hits like a truck, sending a shockwave through the room that leaves Rachel wide-eyed and stunned. Letting out a massive yell of relief, Hirotaka catches his breath while she watches him in total silence. Looking down at the pile of bones and shredded fabric, he awkwardly apologizes for accidentally destroying her stolen gear along with the white. She stares at him for a long moment before finally asking why he would even bother to step in and save her. Before he can really explain, she pulls herself together and claims it was her duty to fight and get those items back anyway. She keeps up the tough act, explaining she's a lone genius mage who doesn't need any help. Reminding him they were actually enemies just a little while ago, she tells him to stay out of her business. Turning his back, he just shrugs and tells her that duty is irrelevant. With a huge grin, he reminds her they agreed on a truce earlier. To him, that makes them teammates for now, so saving her was just the natural thing to do. The words catch her off guard, and she just stares at him in silent disbelief. Joining back up with the priestess, the group stands together as the tension finally clears. But that relief vanishes the moment Rachel freezes, her eyes wide with shock. The priestess looks just as terrified, staring at something behind them. The white's broken body starts to twitch and pull itself back together, stitching the marrow and muscle back into place. Hirotaka just watches in disbelief, certain he had finished the job. As the others watch, the priestess explains that no healing spell can fix a body torn in half like that. It's a full-on resurrection, bringing the monster back to its feet to tower over them once again. The creature just sits there, making the whole fight feel like it's straight-up cheating. Staring it down, Hirotaka realizes that no matter how many times they break its bones, it just keeps coming back. Frightened by the sight, the priestess suggests they should run away while they still have the chance. Instead of backing down, he turns to her with a determined look and promises they can win. Dropping to one knee, he slams his palm against the cracked floor to unleash a massive burst of energy. This burst isn't just for show. Hirotaka explains that his skill can actually strip away the monster's undead nature. He figures if he can just cut through the immortality, the thing will finally stay down. A shockwave ripples through the air, slamming into the white as the power takes hold. As he charges forward, someone screams that he's being reckless and that he'll get caught in the blast before he even hits the target. He just stands his ground, gripping his blade as he faces the creature alone. Looking back with a confident grin, he tells the girls to stay back and let him handle the rest. Rachel watches him in silence, her mind racing. Baffled, she wonders why he would ever go this far for someone like her. Seeing that look on her face, Liz explains that he's simply the type of person who can't turn a blind eye to someone in trouble. He shouts a quick thanks as he grips the monster's skull, feeling a new surge of power. That's because the priestess refused to just stand by, casting a defense spell to give him an extra edge. From the sidelines, Rachel can only watch as the two of them move together like a real team. Watching them work together brings back a bitter memory of her own attempt to hunt a demon king. Back then, she finally felt like she was fitting in as a normal adventurer with a real team. Instead of a bright future, her leader suddenly told her the party was officially breaking up. Admitting the quest was getting too heavy, her friends told her they just wanted to make some easy money. They told her that genius-level work was her responsibility, not theirs. Left standing alone, she realized that having so much power meant she was destined to be on her own. Hirotaka lashes out at the white, trying his best to hold back the monster's regeneration. Suddenly, he senses a strange weight in the air and looks back toward his partner. Rachel is already on her feet, with glowing magic circles appearing all around her. Small sparks of power dance through her fingers as she gathers her strength. Light floods the entire area when she releases the full scale of her mana. Looking him right in the eyes, she tells him she ain't going to let him carry this burden alone anymore. She gives a faint, tired smile, deciding that if he's going to push himself this far, she simply has to step in and help. With that resolve, she lets her power loose in a massive explosion of mana that tears through the air. The white light swallows the entire room, turning the battlefield into ardent flash. As the power hits, it feels like she's finally letting go of the past and clearing the way for a new start. A massive pillar of light erupts, swallowing the entire battlefield in a blinding flash. Hirotaka stands back and watches the energy surge toward the sky. Caught in the center, the creature looks pained as the light starts tearing its body apart. There is no coming back from this, and the white finally begins to dissolve under the pressure. Liza shields her eyes from the glare, admitting the sheer power is beyond anything she expected. Even Rachel looks shocked by what she has done, her eyes wide as the reality of the explosion sinks in. The creature's magical armor starts crumbling into dust right before their eyes. Watching in disbelief, Lizzie realizes Rachel's raw power actually overwhelmed the monster's magic nullification. Rachel stands in the center of the crater with her clothes tattered, looking completely drained. Her vision begins to blur as the massive mana cost finally catches up to her. The giant skull of the white shatters into pieces, its dark form finally giving way. Barely able to keep her eyes open, she tells the group she's leaving the rest to them. Hirotaka immediately lunges forward with his sword held high, not letting Rachel's effort go to waste. Getting right in the monster's face, he activates his special skill to strip the undead attribute away for good. He lets out a massive roar as he slams his blade down for the final strike. The blade slices straight through the monster's neck, trailing a massive black streak behind the swing. Since he took away its undead powers, the beast has no way to shrug off a hit like this. It's a clean, final blow. The monster's head immediately starts crumbling into dark particles. Without any power left to hold it together, the rest of the giant frame, it thus falls apart and blows away in the wind. Soon, there's nothing left but a bit of lingering dust, leaving Hirotaka and Rachel alone in the quiet room. Hirotaka stares into the empty space, barely able to believe they actually pulled it off. Liza looks just as stunned, asking if the fight is really over this time. Once the reality sinks in, he lets out a massive shout of victory while Liz admits she was absolutely terrified. Snapping back to his senses, he asks Liza to hurry and heal Rachel since she's still hurt from the boss's attacks. While the two of them focus on the healing, the dark-haired elf watches them with a cold, piercing gaze. Breaking the quiet, she acknowledges the white is gone, but tells Hirotaka she has one question before they end their temporary truce. The request catches him completely off guard. The elf boss asks why he never let go of the demon sword, even when she was attacking him head-on. Giving her a big smile, he explains that he considers the weapon a comrade just like anyone else. She goes quiet, staring at him in silence as she processes such a simple, honest answer. She finally breaks the silence, telling him she's willing to overlook the demon sword for now. But she has one big condition in exchange. Looking him straight in the eyes with total seriousness, she asks him to join her mission to take down the Demon King. Hirotaka and Liza just freeze with their mouths hanging open, unable to believe the crazy offer. Hirotaka stammers out a response, clearly trying to find a polite way to decline. Seeing his expression, Gisela just laughs and points out that he looks like someone who only cares about living the laziest life possible. He doesn't even try to deny it, but she quickly tells him she ain't expecting an answer right away. Since she has no home to go back to anymore, she figures she just wait until he finally changes his mind. Hirotaka watches her in stunned silence. She asks to join their party as a normal member for now. He quickly snaps out of it and gives her a big smile, saying it's a deal. Gisela looks a little taken aback by his energy, but manages to offer a small thank you. As they shake hands, she flashes a much sharper grin and adds a condition. She warns him that if he ever uses that demon sword for evil, she'd be the one to destroy it for good. A simple nod is all he gives her, not bothered by the threat at all. Looking at her, he realizes someone that honest probably isn't capable of being greedy anyway. With the team finally settled, the group starts the long walk back. As they walk, Hirotaka brings up how she called him the Demon King of Sloth earlier, figuring it was just a joke. Gisela shakes her head and explains that Sloth is actually an official title in this world. Apparently, every Demon King is named after a specific trait, and she points out examples like wrath and greed. Teasing him, she says Sloth fits his lazy attitude perfectly, which just gets an annoyed groan out of him. Still, Hirotaka decides to get things back on track and suggests they finally resume their treasure hunt. Looking skeptical, Gisela asks what treasure he's even talking about, and he explains that finding loot was the whole point of this trip. She stares at him flatly before admitting she has been to the deepest part of these ruins and never saw anything of the sort. Fumbling through his bag, he pulls out a wrinkled map to prove he isn't just making things up. Without a second thought, she tells him he is holding a total fake. He hangs his head as he remembers buying it from some random guys at a tavern, finally realizing he got scammed out of his travel money. Gisela looks at the map and asks why he's carrying her personal property. Hirotaka freezes as he realizes those guys at the tavern weren't just scammers, they were thieves. He starts digging through the rest of his bag to see what else they might have stolen. His heart nearly stops when he pulls out a pair of frilly white panties. When Gisela asks what's wrong, he just covers his eyes in shame. He frantically stuffs the evidence back into the bag, swearing it's nothing. A loud scream echoes through the night air as the news of the empty ruins finally breaks. Back at the guild, the catgirl receptionist clutches her head, crying about how the lack of treasure ruins her big promotion plans. Hirotaka and Clarice just stand there looking drained, trying to explain they survived a life-or-death struggle while she stays dramatic. Eventually, he manages to get a word in, saying that while they didn't find gold, they found something even better. Stepping aside, he reveals Gisela to the group, which leaves the clerk completely frozen in shock. She stands there in her new traveling gear, looking every bit the part of a seasoned adventurer. Glancing down at the dress, she admits she's actually pretty fond of the style. Hirotaka looks a little sheepish, though, explaining that their lack of funds meant he couldn't buy her anything high tier. Still, as she gives him a small, content smile, he figures this works just fine for now. He admits the recent mess really showed him how much he still needs to learn. Instead of leaning on his gear, he vows to get stronger on his own to handle the Demon King. Later, he introduces the group to Rachel, explaining they met her at a grave site. The air in the room shifts the moment he mentions she's actually a former S-rank adventurer. The receptionist slams her hands on the counter, her eyes wide with disbelief. Shouting a welcome, she calls Rachel the long-awaited savior of their entire guild. She gives a polite greeting, looking every bit the legendary hero the clerk expects. Just seeing her up close makes the receptionist go cross-eyed with admiration. Panting with excitement, the girl shouts that a beautiful S-rank elf is a total gold mine for the guild's reputation while Hirotaka watches her freak out. He ignores the chaos and officially welcomes the elf as the newest member of the Galactors, but she just repeats the name with a confused look, clearly wondering why they chose something so weird. Hirotaka just grins, insisting it's a great name because it makes them sound like they're really trying their best. Surprisingly, Rachel takes it in stride, letting out a small laugh and admitting she actually likes it. While the elf is on board, Gisela stands there in silence, looking like she's the only one left with any common sense. Rubbing the back of his head, he admits the exhaustion is finally hitting him now that the pressure is off. He figures they've done enough for one day and suggests they head home to get some much-needed rest. Before they head out, Hirotaka asks Clarice to wait for just a moment. He reaches out, offering her a small, simple cloth grip. As she looks at it in surprise, he admits he felt bad since everyone else in the party already got something new. Rubbing the back of his neck, he explains he noticed how much she uses her staff and figured this would keep her hands from slipping. Still, her silence makes him worrying, and he quickly apologizes in case she doesn't actually want it. Instead of being upset, Clarice yells that she definitely wants it. She admits her hands get soaked with sweat whenever she's nervous, so the grip is actually a total lifesaver. Hirotaka is just glad he didn't mess up, so he waves goodbye and tells her he'll see her tomorrow. Left behind in the hallway, she stares at her staff with shimmering eyes, clearly touched by the gift. She grips the new handle tightly, thinking about how Hirotaka has already done so much for her. Even so, she can't help feeling like she hasn't given anything back in return. Memories of the day's battle flood back, reminding her how she froze up while monsters swarmed the group. Looking back, she admits she tried to cast defensive spells over and over, but her nerves kept getting in the way. It wasn't until the very last second that she finally managed to pull off a shield to protect him. Recalling his kind words from earlier, she realizes he saw right through her struggle and knew she was just trying her best to be useful. Actually, it goes much deeper than that. Clarice looks back on how she used to feel small and alone, even when surrounded by others. The truth is, she was just living in constant fear of being a disappointment. Then Hirotaka reached out a hand, offering her a way out of that dark place. His simple act of acceptance meant the world to her. Since he was the only one who told her it was okay to fail, she finally feels like she has a place where she belongs. Determined to change, she stares ahead with a fresh spark in her eyes. She figures it's high time she actually started pulling her weight. Eager for a mentor, she rushes over to find Rachel and ask about improving her magic. But as she bursts into the room, she catches the elf completely off guard and in the middle of changing. The poor girl just freezes on the spot and lets out a panicked shriek. Hirotaka is just trying to relax in bed when he hears Rachel's voice drifting through the wall. Hearing her casually ask for a massage on her sensitive spots makes him bolt upright in confusion. As the muffled commotion continues next door, he stares at the ceiling and wonders if the elf is being a bit too weird with her new trainee. His expression softens as he looks back on his journey so far. He used to think he'd be a solo traveler forever in this world, but looking at his sleeping companion, he realizes he finally has people he can call his own. Gazing at the starry sky, he realizes just how lucky he's become. Over the next few days, the Galactors start settling into their new life together. They keep busy by taking on guild requests and hunting down monsters. Whether they're visiting the guild or dealing with more awkward moments at home, they find a steady rhythm. A few mornings later, Hirotaka walks out and gives everyone a sleepy greeting as he yawns. Suddenly, his eyes go wide as he sees something totally unexpected. The guild hall is packed with a massive crowd of adventurers, leaving him staring in shock at the sea of people. It's so cramped that the wooden floorboards are actually groaning under the heavy pressure. Panicking, he rushes toward the counter and warns the staff that the whole building is about to cave in. He finds Lorna buried under a mountain of paperwork, looking completely drained, but still wearing a wide grin. She admits the paperwork is a nightmare, but says this surge in popularity is a huge success for the guild. Standing there in silence, he wonders what kind of success involves this much chaos. Lorna gives him the answer by slamming a flyer onto the counter. It is a hand-drawn poster calling them a party of gorgeous heroes who defeated the tomb boss, complete with sketches of their faces. Staring at the drawings, Hirotaka gets a bit dizzy as the weight of his unwanted fame finally hits him. Claris figures this explains why everyone in town has been whispering about them lately. Rachel points out that big feats always boost a guild's reputation and bring in more work. Since they are the stars of the show, she figures the crowd is here just to catch a glimpse of them. He can only look down and accept that his low-profile days are officially gone. A crowd of girls is already screaming that the flyer is a lie because they don't see any handsome guys nearby. Hirotaka just stands there with a blank stare, forced to listen as the crowd roasts his looks. Wiping his face, he listens to a random guy nearby complain that he clearly isn't the star from the poster. Just then, a scarred adventurer steps forward and asks if he's the one who cleared the monsters at Kyan's tomb. Looking a bit stunned, he admits that they really were the ones who did it. The group immediately erupts in cheers, patting him on the back and shouting about how amazing that is. They start bombarding him with questions, wanting to know how he survived the curse and what it was like to defeat such a monster. It's a complete 180 from when they were just making fun of his face. He stands there with his eyes wide, looking like he's caught in a physical wave of noise. As the crowd leans in and demands a full play-by-play of the fight, he can barely get a word out. He tries to wave them off, insisting he's not the hero they're looking for. Before he can make an escape, Lorna steps in and tells him he should just accept the praise. She explains that in a world this rough, being an adventurer is really about giving people a dream to hold onto. One look at the inspired faces in the crowd shows that her words hit home. He watches Claris hide under her cloak, noticing how much the noise is getting to her. Adjusting her hood, she admits she never expected their party to become the talk of the town so quickly. A curious adventurer cuts in to ask what rank he is, assuming he has to be in a rank or even higher. He keeps a straight face for a moment while Claris remains hidden in the background. Breaking the silence, he tells the crowd he is only in E rank. The guys standing nearby go quiet, their faces going empty as the news sinks in. Doubt starts spreading through the room immediately with people whispering that a bottom-tier rookie couldn't have pulled off such a feat. Just as the mood turns sour, Lorna jumps up and demands silence, shouting that there is a deep reason behind his low rank. The sudden outburst catches everyone off guard, making the whole room lean in to listen. Looking surprisingly serious, she explains that real adventurers don't care about money or status. They only care about saving people. She insists he stayed at E rank on purpose out of pure humble conviction, even though he looks like he has no idea what she is talking about. To settle things, she finally announces that he is going to take the promotion exam and climb the ranks to meet everyone's expectations. The guild erupts in a massive roar of approval, thrilled to hear that their local legend is officially moving up. Because Lorna convinced him it's for the best, Hirotaka finally agrees to take the promotion exam. Trying to look cool, he plays along with the rumors that he's jumping straight to S rank, even if he knows it's a bit much. Eventually, the morning of the big test finally arrives. He heads over to a massive guild hall called the Bed of the One-Eyed Bear, finding the venue already packed with other nervous candidates. An official with a megaphone calls out for everyone who passed the oral test to head over to the front desk. While some of the candidates nearby brag about how easy it was, Hirotaka and his friends don't look like they're in a celebrating mood. The three of them stand there in total shock, shadows hanging over their eyes while the proctor hands out packets for the afternoon practical. Noticing the heavy vibe, the other examinees whisper to each other and try to give them some space. He just gazes down at the floor, unable to say a word as the reality of the next test sinks in. That silence doesn't last long because they find out they officially passed the oral exam. He and Reina throw their hands up in joy, letting out all that pent-up stress. Watching them, Lisa just wears a smug little grin, thinking they're being way too dramatic over such a simple test. A quick flashback shows the headache she went through trying to teach him, even struggling with basic math like 1 + 1. Snapping back, he points right at her and shouts that the simple test was a massive struggle for him. Reynolds smiles, mentioning she actually had a great time studying together. Hearing this, Lisa tells him he should just be thankful he managed to scrape by. He lets out a long sigh of relief, just glad that hurdle is behind him. Staring ahead with a grin, he admits he really doesn't want to let the guild members down after all the hype. The moment of peace is short-lived because they're told the practical exam kicks off right after lunch. While they get ready, the regulars at the White Cat Inn are busy laughing and wondering if the group has hit S rank yet. The group arrives at the Noeris Forest for their afternoon practical exam. Gathering at the entrance, all the candidates wait to hear the rules. An official explains the test works like a standard request, where they have to carry heavy gear to a base deep in the woods. To pass, they also need to hunt down 3 monsters and gather to specific types of herbs along the way. Looking into the dense trees, Hirotaka realizes this is going to be much more than a simple hike. He remembers this patch of the woods as the place where he first stepped in to help them out. His sword, Osoro, was a huge part of that fight, keeping the monsters at bay when things got dangerous. While it hasn't actually been that long, standing here again makes him feel a bit sentimental. Lisa looks back at the trees, remembering the exact moment she was cornered by those creatures. When the conversation turns to how a talented mage was saved that day, Reynolds gets flustered and tries to play it down. Smiling, Lisa notes that despite the exam stress and constant requests, he never once neglected his magic training. She gives him a gentle head pat, telling him she really admires his hard work as a fellow mage. Watching from the side, Reynolds looks completely stunned by the sudden show of affection. Lisa quickly ruins the sweet moment by joking about wanting a massage in some sensitive spots, leaving him bright red and speechless. Before he can even process the joke, the other examinees start shouting and charging into the woods to kick off the hunt. He hears someone call his name and spots Edgar waving him over with a big grin. It turns out the whole crew from the White Cat Inn is here, with Scott and Ralph lining up right alongside the other examinees. Seeing them all together makes him realize just how many people are actually aiming for the same goal. Edgar explains that monster activity has been spiking lately, so the kingdom is doing everything it can to recruit more help. Lisa figures that's probably why she was ambushed, and Raynal adds that the guild is getting buried in hunt requests lately. Listening to them, Hirotaka takes a second to process the situation. Flashbacks of feral wolves and that massive skeletal beast suddenly cross his mind. Staring off into the distance, he wonders why these creatures only ever seem to target humans. Lisa points out that monsters are built that way, though Hirotaka isn't entirely convinced. Just as he starts to wonder, a flock of birds suddenly bursts from the trees in a panic. A thunderous crash echoes through the forest, nearly knocking the whole group off their feet. Stumbling back, they stare into the woods with wide eyes, completely stunned by the sudden impact. The ground beneath them starts shaking violently, and Hirotaka can only watch in silence as Lisa tenses up beside him. Behind them, other examinees don't stick around to see what happened, screaming as they bolt back toward the forest entrance. Edgar and the rest of the group try to keep their balance, wondering if that was just a massive earthquake. The tremors fade, but the air suddenly feels heavy with an overwhelming amount of mana. Someone gasps, admitting they've never felt power this intense in their entire life. Wiping sweat from his forehead, Hirotaka wonders if an incredibly strong monster just appeared. He figures his earlier thoughts about rising monster activity were more accurate than he wanted. Lisa stays silent, her eyes wide as she stares into the distance. She looks like she's seen a ghost. Seeing the panic, Hirotaka tells the group the situation is bad and they need to go help. He starts running toward the source of the blast, hoping they aren't too late. But Lisa stops him in his tracks, telling him that he's wrong. This isn't just a monster. Instead of a beast, a pair of dark, curved horns appears through the haze. A thin demon tail flicks behind her, showing she's definitely not human. Looking down with a shadowed face, she keeps muttering that it's all wrong. She stands in the middle of the clearing and repeats the word over and over, sounding like she's searching for something specific. Seeing the girl up close, Raynal realizes she's barely more than a child. Suddenly, Lisa screams a desperate warning, her face twisted in pure terror as she senses the lethal power coming off the small figure. The girl ignores the noise, focusing her gaze as she confirms she's finally found what she came for. Hirotaka breaks into a cold sweat, paralyzed by the realization of what he is actually looking at. She stands right there in the dirt, looking incredibly small for someone putting off such a terrifying pressure. Her long white hair flows around her as she stares them down with cold, heavy eyes. Despite her tiny frame and the strange, bat-like wings on her back, the sheer weight of her presence makes it hard for anyone to even breathe. Lisa finally puts a name to the terrifying power, realizing they aren't just facing a regular monster. This is a demon king. As the girl narrows her eyes, she looks completely unbothered by the panic she's causing. There's a sharp, predatory look in her gaze, like she's finally found the prize she's been hunting for. She lets out a long, bored sigh, complaining that checking everyone one by one is such a massive pain. Lisa's eyes shrink to pinpricks as she watches her, completely paralyzed by the entity in front of them. Behind her, the rest of the group stands frozen, unable to even breathe under that heavy pressure. Suddenly, the living sword at Hirotaka's waist starts reacting on its own, its single eye snapping open as he reaches for the hilt. She floats right into his personal space, hovering just inches from his face. Hirotaka freezes on the spot, his pupils shrinking to tiny dots as cold sweat pours down his neck. Leaning in close enough for him to see the ring in her eye, she simply tells him to give it back. She doesn't even wait for a response before lashing out. With one casual movement, she sends a massive shockwave through the woods, tearing through everything in its path. Bringing a finger to her lip, she watches him with a bored expression, wondering what the holdup is. Hirotaka can only watch in shock as the trees behind him are shredded to pieces. She warns him not to get in her way, making it clear she has no patience for games. A massive shockwave suddenly tears through the clearing as the demon girl lashes out with a strike meant to end things. Watching from the sidelines, Lisa freezes in total disbelief at the sight. She realizes Hirotaka just flicked away a hit that pierces all magic defense using nothing but a single finger. Raynal stands nearby with her mouth hanging open, completely stunned. Pale and shaking, she admits she couldn't even see the movement, her body refusing to even budge. The girl leans in close, tilting his chin up as she wonders what kind of idiot would stand in her way. Looking him over, she notes he has no real power and figures it's almost a waste of time to kill him. Suddenly, she lunges for the scabbard at his waist, demanding he hand it over immediately. Hirotaka reacts instantly, slamming his hand down to guard the hilt while shouting at her to back off. Instead of backing away, she just stares at him with cold eyes and calls him a thief. She leans in closer to drop a massive bombshell, introducing herself as Gisela, the Demon King of Sloth. Looking him dead in the eye, she claims she's actually the true contractor for his sword, Osoro. Hirotaka just stands there, his face going pale as the weight of her words hits him. Staring back in silence, he repeats the claim under his breath, unable to believe his own weapon belongs to a monster like her. Before he can even form a response, she grips the hilt and starts yanking the sword right out of his hands. She hoists him straight into the air like he weighs nothing, leaving him dangling by his own weapon. His friends shout from the distance, completely helpless to stop her. Struggling to hold on, he can't believe someone so small could have this much raw power. Gisela stares him down, clearly confused that he still has the blade and wondering why he didn't just throw it away. Hirotaka starts to break a sweat as he processes the Demon King's claim, realizing she was the one searching for the blade. He wonders if he just picked it up by mistake. A heavy sense of guilt washes over him. He starts to think that if she's the original owner, Osoro really belongs at her side instead of his. Gisela ignores his internal crisis and looks down at the hilt with a bored expression, telling the sword it's time to head home. She reaches for the scabbard, but Hirotaka keeps his grip firm despite the pressure. Right between them, the eye on the crossguard snaps open and looks directly at her. It's finally reacting, staring up at the woman who claims to be its true master. Instead of a happy reunion, Gisela recoils with a look of pure disbelief. Confused by her reaction, Hirotaka looks down to find Osoro's eye wide open and fixed on her. The Demon King just stands there shivering, seemingly terrified by her own weapon. She hangs her head in silence, looking more like a rejected kid than a world-ending threat. Hirotaka watches as she floats back up into the air, keeping a tight grip on his blade. He blinks in confusion, but the quiet moment doesn't last long. Snapping out of her trance, she suddenly bursts into a tearful fit of rage. With a terrifying roar, she unleashes a massive wave of dark energy that threatens to level the entire forest. Suddenly, Gisela dives down from the sky with a manic grin, ready to tear through everything. Hirotaka tenses up and draws Osoro, meeting her charge head-on. Glaring back, the eye on the hilt stays wide open and fixed on her. The air screams as the two forces finally collide. She stares right back, unable to look away from that vertical pupil. On the hilt, more eyes begin to peel open, twitching as they fixate on her. Hirotaka grits his teeth and pours everything into the block, holding her back even as dark smoke starts pouring off the blade. Gisela leans her entire weight against the blade, her face just inches away as she tries to force him down. Looking completely stunned by the sudden surge of energy, Hirotaka calls out the sword's name in a panic. She just screams in pure rage, unable to believe a human is actually standing his ground. Her body shifts into a massive, jagged shadow as she promises that he won't be dying easily. Looking her in the eye, he ignores the threat and asks the weapon if it's ready for what's coming next. He makes his final choice, vowing out loud that he will never hand the sword back to her. They square off in the clearing, the forest falling silent as they both wait for the other to move. Hirotaka braces himself, his knuckles turning white from how hard he's gripping the hilt. Gisela stares him down with pure hatred, warning him that he shouldn't expect a quick or easy death. He doesn't blink, making it clear one last time that he isn't giving the sword up no matter what. Suddenly, the wind picks up and the talking finally stops. Hirotaka tenses up as she suddenly blurs out of sight. She lunges forward with terrifying speed, giving him almost no time to react. Stunned, he can only watch as the gap between them closes. She flips through the air, turning into a whirlwind of motion. In a heartbeat, she's right in his face, reaching out with a predatory look in her eye. A massive shockwave tears through the woods, leveling everything in its path. Skidding across the dirt, Hirotaka digs his heels in to avoid being blown away. He can barely keep his eyes open against the sheer pressure. Still, she just watches him with a cold, bored expression while the world around them falls apart. When dark energy begins to crackle between them, he manages to steady his blade for the next move. The shock sends a jolt through his hands, making him wince as he keeps a firm grip on the hilt. While he struggles, Gisela just watches him in silence. She notes that her power should have wiped out the entire forest, yet her energy is somehow being neutralized the moment it hits his blade. Demanding an answer, she asks what he actually did to her attack. He catches his breath and explains that Osoro destroys the mana of anything it touches. It's a unique skill called mana break. He stands firm, shouting that her attacks are useless now and telling her she should just give up. Looking at the sword, he realizes Osoro actually triggered the power on its own. He picked up the skill after defeating a white, but he'd honestly forgotten he even had it until the blade forced it out. Still, the raw weight of her physical strikes is terrifying. Since her mana ain't running dry at all, he figures he won't be able to hold this defensive position for very long. Gisela stands there in a cold, stunned silence. Snapping out of it, she demands to know what that skill is, since she's never heard of anything like it. She calls him a common thief who's acting way too high and mighty for her taste. She follows that up by screaming, demanding to know how a human could even sneak into the castle to steal such a weapon. He just sighs and explains that he didn't actually steal it. Instead, he used a skill that automatically collects discarded items every 12 hours. Pointing right back at her, he realizes this means she must have tossed the blade aside herself. He thinks it's pretty rich for her to complain now that he's the one who picked it up. Stunned by the logic, she tries to deny the accusation. Eventually, she looks away and admits she didn't throw it out, she just forgot where she left it for a few decades. She looks completely embarrassed as the truth finally comes out. He yells back, figuring she only realized it was missing once the other demon kings started giving her a hard time, since she didn't notice it was gone for so long. He tells her she might as well have just thrown it away. Screaming for him to shut up, Gisela covers her ears as her face turns bright red. She shouts back a string of insults, calling him an idiot for acting so superior. The duel officially devolves into a childish shouting match as they stand there in the woods, pointing fingers and yelling back and forth. Watching from the trees, the necromancer and Rachel can only stare as the supposed life or death battle continues to be a petty spat. While the necromancer is impressed Hirotaka can hold his own, her younger companion wonders if all demon kings are actually this ridiculous. Suddenly, a wave of guilt hits Gisela as she remembers how she actually treated the sword back in the day, using the legendary blade as nothing more than a cup noodle weight and a back scratcher. She looks away with a slight blush, realizing they really did spend a lot of quiet, lazy days together before she lost it. Gisela finally snaps and shouts that she has had enough of this conversation. A heavy silence follows as she just stands there, refusing to say another word. Hirotaka suddenly spots something in the distance and points toward the trees. Tensing up, he grips his sword and wonders what kind of trouble is coming now. An entire squad of soldiers suddenly bursts through the forest, charging straight for their position. Rachel recognizes them immediately as soldiers from the nearby town. Shouting at the top of his lungs, their leader points at Hirotaka and tells everyone not to be fooled by his appearance. He claims Hirotaka is the one who attacked the adventurers, rallying the whole group to move in. Panicking, The necromancer screams for them to stay back, warning that a demon king is an opponent they can win against. That name stops everyone cold, leaving the soldiers staring at her in total confusion. Ignoring the confused soldiers, she bites her thumb in annoyance. Clearly done with all the talking, she chants a dark incantation, calling for her kin to rise and join the fray. Massive black swirls tear through the air as clawed monsters crawl out to surround everyone. As the nightmare unfolds, Hirotaka freezes on the spot, unable to find any words. Winged vampires screech as they dive-bomb the soldiers from above. With a cold smirk, Gisela tells her monsters to slaughter every human they see. The creatures swarm the clearing, circling the group like vultures. Staring up in horror, the guards begin to tremble as they realize they are trapped. Even Hirotaka looks shaken, staring at the sky in silence. He finally snaps out of it, screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stop. Instead, the vampire army rains down on the soldiers, tearing through their armor as they realize they're completely outmatched. Gisela just watches the chaos with a twisted smile, asking if he really thinks he has the time to look away right now. She lunges from the air, forcing Hirotaka to snap back and block a heavy overhead swing. Reminding him he's facing a demon king, she says his distraction was a huge mistake. As she lands another massive blow, she warns that he'll regret keeping her sword for so long. He grits his teeth and tries to hold his ground. Looking at him with wide eyes, she just stares him down with a manic grin. But she suddenly stops her assault, leaning down to inspect a small, dark hole in the dirt. Letting out a confused noise, she watches a pair of tiny eyes staring back at her from the shadows. Hirotaka freezes on the spot, blinking as the aggressive energy suddenly vanishes. While the Demon King is distracted, the necromancer begins a deep chant to call on the spirits of death. She finished the ritual with a shout, and these massive, hulking skeletal monsters burst right out of the dirt. Looking way tougher than the average ghoul, they seem ready to tear through anything in their way. Staring down the Demon King with a look of pure focus, she makes it clear that the slaughter stops here. She isn't about to let Gisela have her way anymore. The skeletal giants loom over the battlefield, making the soldiers panic as they assume a second wave of monsters has arrived. Quickly shouting for them to stay calm, the necromancer explains that these ghouls are actually there to help. As the battlefield stabilizes, Rachel realizes she needs to do her part too and begins a rhythmic chant for a holy shield. Throwing her staff forward, she triggers a massive protection spell that ripples across the field, forming a golden barrier that easily blocks the vampire's claws. This gives the soldiers some much-needed breathing room to finally start fighting back. With the barrier holding firm, she finally looks a bit more confident. While the barrier holds, the necromancer thinks back to her past failures and vows she won't be that helpless person anymore. Beside her, Rachel feels a similar surge of resolve, promising herself she'd protect both Hirotaka and everyone else on this field. Standing their ground, they tell Hirotaka to leave the defense to them so he can finally focus on the demon lord. Hearing their voices, Hirotaka looks up with a surge of relief as he calls out their names. Gisela doesn't look bothered at all, even with a giant skeletal hand pinning her down. She notes that the elf is actually capable of using high-level necromancy, which was magic originally created by a demon king. Not missing a beat, Lisa simply points out that she's a genius. Still, she admits her talent alone isn't enough to match a true demon king's power yet. She warns Hirotaka to stay out of the way so she can focus on the defense. Lisa admits that she and her magic aren't enough to finish this alone. Looking him in the eye, she tells Hirotaka that with his help, they can actually bring the Demon King down. Then, he stares ahead in silence as the weight of the task sinks in. When he grips the hilt of his sword, his expression hardens. Part of him is still surprised, considering he only ever wanted a quiet life in the middle of nowhere. Still, he refuses to forgive anyone who tries to hurt the people he cares about. He points his sword directly at the Demon King of Sloth, declaring that he's going to be the one to take her down. Bound tightly by Lisa's spirits, the girl just stares back at him with a look of genuine surprise. A low chuckle escapes her as she asks if a human really thinks he can defeat someone of her rank. Her lips curl into a wide, creepy grin, making it clear she is even slightly worried. She licks her lips, whispering how interesting this has finally become. Ignoring the taunt, he lunges forward with a heavy strike to catch her off guard. Seeing the opening, Lisa screams for everyone to keep up the pressure and cover him. Her skeletal summons swarm the area, crashing through the ground to clear a path. Gisela, impressed by the massive swarm, scoffing that 100 spirits are still nothing compared to her. With a casual flick, she unleashes a shockwave that shreds the entire front line in an instant. Even as the army keeps charging, they're being torn to pieces by the raw power coming off her. Clicking her tongue, she calls them annoying pests that just won't stop crawling her way. Her gaze narrows as she focuses on her next move. The monsters scan the trees, looking lost as the battlefield goes quiet. Suddenly, he's right there, lunging from her blind spot to catch her off guard. Gisela's eyes go wide when she realizes her target has vanished from her line of sight. Gisela's eye goes wide as she realizes she has been played. While she was busy blasting the main force, he was using the undead army as a screen to mask his approach. He yells out that he has finally got her, his face locked in pure focus. Putting everything into this one moment, he brings his sword down for the killing strike. But the strike never hits its mark. Instead, a sharp blade of dark energy tears right through his side, stopping him cold. He freezes on the spot, his eyes wide as he stares down at the blood dripping onto the grass. The Demon King was just way faster than anyone realized. He grinds his teeth as blood spills out, his eyes shaking in pure shock. Gisela just leans in with a smug smile and calls him a naive human. Stepping back into the forest, she leaves him to stagger alone in the dirt. After that, she gives him one last mocking glance, like she's already bored. Hirotaka's strength finally gives out, and his head falls back as he loses consciousness. Just as he's about to fade, he grits his teeth and forces his eyes back open. His foot slams into the dirt, steadying his body before he can fall. Grabbing the dark blade still stuck in his chest, he pulls himself forward to close the distance. When Gisela sees him sliding further onto her sword, her eyes go wide in total disbelief. He lets out a ragged roar, putting every last drop of energy into this one final push. He drives the blade forward with everything he has left, slamming it right through the Demon King's head. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his gut, he watches the metal burst out the other side. As his own vision begins to blur, he makes sure this strike is the one that ends it all. The blade sinks deep into Gisela's chest, catching her completely off guard. Her eyes go wide as she stares at the weapon now buried in her shoulder. For the first time, she looks genuinely stunned, unable to process how he actually landed this blow. It's a final, desperate strike that leaves no room for retreat. She stares down in wide-eyed shock as the dark blade sinks deep into her chest. Leaning his whole weight into the strike, he looks like he's pouring every last bit of his life into this one move. Tiny cracks start to web out from the wound, showing that his desperate gamble might actually work. Instead of falling, she just stares at him with a look of genuine praise. She admits he did well to land such a strike, even as the cracks on her skin get worse. He can barely process the words, staring back with wide, exhausted eyes. Flashing one last mischievous grin, she treats the whole thing like a fun game. Suddenly, her body begins to crumble into glowing dust. As she fades, she promises to remember his name, calling him Hirotaka one last time. With a final swirl of wind, she completely vanishes into the air. He is left standing alone in the silence, the weight of the fight finally catching up to him. The soldiers look on in disbelief as the enemy monsters crumble into ash and drift away. That stillness is quickly replaced by a deafening roar as the army realizes they actually won and start shouting that the war is over. Standing in the middle of the noise, Hirotaka hunches over and gasps for air, his body finally reaching its limit. Just then, a blood-stained hand reaches out as someone desperately calls his name. He looks up with hollow eyes, blood dripping from his chin as he tries to focus on the voice calling to him. Lisa and Sarah sprint toward him across the empty field, their faces pale with worrying as they lead the rest of the group. Seeing them safe, a faint, relieved smile crosses his lips. He manages to whisper that he's just glad they aren't hurt. As he tells them he's glad everyone made it, his chin begins to drop toward his chest. Finally, his body goes limp and he slumps forward into the dirt as his world fades to white. He hits the ground with a heavy thud. Desperate to reach him, the girls scramble across the dirt while screaming his name. Everything goes quiet except for the slow, steady beat of his heart as he finally slips into a deep sleep. Before long, word of the Demon King's defeat travels fast. Soon, the entire town is buzzing with the news, leaving people torn between fear and relief as they wonder what this means for their future. Most of that gossip centers on the rumors about the person who actually landed the final blow. Over at the guild, the receptionist starts shouting through her tears for everyone to look. They all watch as Hirotaka finally walks into the room, though the cheers make him feel like a baby taking its first steps. While he shuffles past, Lisa and Sarah watch him through tears of exhaustion and relief. Lisa breaks down completely, sobbing about how much blood he lost and how magic wouldn't even wake him up at first. He just stands there, looking stunned as she admits she was terrified he was gone for good. While she continues to cry, he awkwardly tries to pat her on the back to calm her down. To break the heavy mood, he lets out a ridiculous baby noise, which just earns him a lecture from the receptionist. Watching the weird display from the side, Sarah wonders aloud if she's witnessing some kind of strange role play. Lorna keeps the lecture going, reminding him that he was out cold for 3 full days. Apologizing for the scare, he notices Ralph and the others finally relaxing in the background. Sarah eventually steps in to change the subject, explaining that she wants to give him her thanks properly now that the chaos has died down. She mentions how miraculous it is that they drove back the Demon King without losing a single person. Looking him right in the eyes, she tells him he's truly an incredible guy, leaving Hirotaka looking a bit stunned by the praise. He doesn't take the compliment well. Looking down, he admits he's the one who let the Demon King escape and put everyone at risk. Edgar chimes in with a heavy heart, taking the blame for calling the town guards into a fight they couldn't win. Reassuring his friends, he tells them they actually did a great job since they didn't know what they were up against. Lisa stays quiet, just watching him with wide, worried eyes. She seems lost in thought as she continues to stare at him. Breaking the silence, Liz admits she was actually terrified of his magic sword at the beginning. He blinks, caught off guard by her intense focus. She explains that the blade is a mark of the Demon King, holding a power that always felt far too dangerous. Even so, she's glad he never got rid of it, figuring the weapon is basically his partner now. She gives him a warm smile, saying it's a relief he didn't let go of something so precious. Sarah chimes in to agree right away. Looking him in the eye, she admits that if he were the type to abandon a comrade, she never would have followed him this far. The praise catches Hirotaka off guard. He finally lets out a small sound, still trying to process how much they trust him. He looks up and offers a quiet thank you, his expression softening as he faces them. The mood shifts when Edgar asks about that magic sword, and he realizes he never actually shared the secret. While the others wait for an answer, he starts piecing together a proper explanation. Once the truth is out, a loud shout echoes through the room from everyone's pure shock. Trembling at the news, Liza and Sarah look completely stunned while he begs them to keep the whole thing quiet. The receptionist interrupts the tense moment by clearing her throat, telling Hirotaka she has a major announcement. He just looks up, a bit confused by the sudden shift in focus. She points a finger up and explains that his bravery against the Demon King has finally been officially recognized. Popping a celebratory banner, she reveals the party has skipped ahead straight to C rank. The group just stares at the confetti in total disbelief, having never expected such a massive promotion. He asks if she's serious, since skipping this many ranks is completely unheard of. The receptionist just hums along happily, mentioning that the guild is so flooded with new members they're practically short-staffed. Hirotaka points out they didn't even finish the adventure exam, but Edgar just laughs it off, figuring a demon king kill, a pretty solid substitute. Later, that morning, he finds a news report featuring a witness giving a dramatic interview about the fight. He just stares at the page, wondering how the whole thing became such a media circus so fast. Listening to the crowd, Hirotaka realizes they're making his fight sound way more legendary than it really was. Just as he's thinking they shouldn't just lie, Gisela slips in right behind him and whispers that he actually got beaten by her hair alone. He spins around in shock, unable to believe the Demon King of Sloth is just standing there in the middle of town. Sweating and stuttering, he can't even form a sentence. She tells him to stay quiet and keep his cool. She adds a casual threat while playing with a tiny bat, saying she might just kill everyone nearby if things get too noisy again. Staring in pure shock, he can't even find his voice to respond. When a friend notices his weird behavior and asks what's up, he panics and yells that it's nothing at all. Gisela ignores the outburst and tells him she wants a private chat, turning her back on the group as she orders him to keep up. They move into a quieter corner of the city to talk. Instead of a secret interrogation, Gisela starts glowing with joy the moment she takes a bite of food. Walking down the street, she happily declares that human snacks really are the best, while Hirotaka follows behind, wondering why he's the one paying for her lunch. After finishing the treat, she starts humming and looks for her next target, leaving him to call out after her as she ignores his questions. Hirotaka finally stops the food tour to ask the one question on his mind. How is she still alive after that final battle? Gisela scoffs at the idea, laughing that she wasn't even trying and wouldn't be taken out by something so weak. Hearing this, Sarah and Liza stand there in total shock, looking like they have just seen a ghost. Surprisingly, Hirotaka stays calm and admits he had a gut feeling she was still around somewhere. This gets a curious look from the little demon as she watches him with a smug grin. Reaching for his hilt, he asks if she is finally here to reclaim her magic sword. The air gets heavy between them as he waits for her next move. Even though he's ready for a fight, she just stares back with a cold, blank look. Instead of attacking, she just sighs and shrugs her shoulders. She complains that humans are always way too quick to start a brawl. Apparently, reclaiming the sword isn't even her goal. She claims she has thought of something way better, leaving him completely baffled. With a smug little grin, she looks him right in the eye and drops the real bombshell. She tells Hirotaka that he needs to step up and become the next Demon King himself. Hirotaka just stares at her, his mind going blank as he tries to process the insane suggestion. Behind him, the girls are just as stunned, unable to form a coherent thought. When he finally snaps and asks what she's even talking about, she just waves him off and tells him to pipe down. She explains that being the Demon King is actually a massive hassle because heroes are constantly trying to pick a fight or steal her sword. On top of that, the other Demon Kings give her a hard time whenever she loses her gear, so she figures it's easier to let him deal with it instead. She gives him a little poke, insisting that he is actually a perfect fit for the job. He just stands there looking completely baffled by the suggestion. Then she asks if he's noticed his body feeling strangely light or more powerful lately. Thinking back to his last big fight, he starts to realize she might be onto something. With a smug look, she explains that the magic sword actually took a liking to him. It's been boosting his physical stats this whole time to help him out. Gisela explains that even if she wasn't going all out, no normal human could survive her strikes without that sword's power. Standing there in silence, Hirotaka tries to process the idea that he wasn't actually that strong on his own. He looks down at the magic weapon resting on his hip. As everything finally clicks, he realizes just how much help he's actually had this whole time. She leans right into his face to push the contract again, but he shuts her down with a loud refusal. Lisa immediately backs him up, shouting that there is absolutely no way he is taking the offer. Fearing the worst, She mentions hearing rumors about how that magic sword can warp a person's soul. Her eyes start to water as she tells him that even if he tries to stay the same, the power will change who he is. While Lisa worries, Gisela just shrugs and explains that the role only makes a person follow their own desires. She points out that while his sword skills are already great, taking the throne would unlock the blade's true form. With that power, he would finally be free to live exactly how he wants without anyone holding him back. Taking it all in, he considers the promise of a life filled with total ease. Lisa just whispers the word freedom, clearly uneasy with where this is going. Hirotaka calls her out on the contradiction, reminding her that she literally just said the job was a massive pain. He makes it clear he is sticking with his current party and tells her to just go home already. Throwing a tantrum, Gisela complains that she just wants to live a lazy life of drinking. She eventually declares she isn't leaving his side until he gives in and accepts the throne. Sarah watches the scene unfold, noticing how quickly this epic showdown turned into a weird domestic argument. While the others keep bickering, Lisa remains silent and looks deeply troubled. Eventually, the immediate chaos settles as the story moves into a new chapter. Seeing the former Demon King just standing there, the catgirl receptionist freezes with her eyes wide behind her glasses. Gisela doesn't seem to care about the awkwardness at all, waving a friendly hand with a big, smug grin. She even starts putting up signs around the place, making herself right at home without being asked. Hirotaka and the receptionist can only watch in silence, unsure of what to make of their new roommate. As the days pass, Hirotaka settles into a routine of chores and town life with his new companion following along. Still, Lisa watches from a distance with a heavy expression, clearly unable to let go of her worries. Despite that heavy atmosphere, a few days pass and Hirotaka starts putting in some serious hours at the local training hall. Wiping sweat from his brow, he eventually drags himself back home where Lisa is waiting with a bright smile. Sarah asks if he is getting used to the new drills yet, and he figures he's doing just fine. He gets surprisingly fired up about his progress, even showing off a pose for a move he's dubbed his new super special slash. Looking at him with a flat expression, Sarah reminds him that he already gets plenty of real combat experience from their usual guild jobs. Hirotaka stands there quietly, admitting that while he knew his friends helped, he actually thought he was doing okay on his own. Looking down at the blade on his hip, he realizes he didn't even notice how much it was carrying him this whole time. He sighs and tells Lisa that he is just a weak person in the end, leaving her wide-eyed and struggling to find the words to disagree. He admits he was actually terrified the whole time, feeling like his lack of power put everyone in serious danger. Clenching his fist, he tells her he has no choice but to get much stronger. Lisa just watches him, clearly moved by his honesty. Suddenly, Gisela chimes in to say that becoming the Demon King is the fastest way to get that strength. He gives her an annoyed look and tells her to just give it a rest already. Suddenly, Gisela shows up in a frilly made outfit with little bat wings, giving a casual wave as if this is totally normal. The whole group freezes, staring at her in complete silence. Snapping out of it, Hirotaka demands to know what on earth she is doing dressed like that. Lorna watches from the side, looking a bit confused by the sudden costume change. Striking a proud pose, she explains she's the new Demon King receptionist meant to help with the guild's labor shortage. Hirotaka just yells that her huge impact is going to blow the whole building apart. Ignoring the shouting, Gisela starts twirling around to show off how great she looks in her new outfit. Hirotaka just watches with a tired expression, wondering what she's actually up to this time. She leans in with a playful smirk, sticking her tongue out while explaining that she can actually be motivated when it counts. Apparently, she's only doing this to secure a lazier future for herself. Reaching into her bag, she mentions she found the perfect job for the group. She whips out a formal document with a flourish, revealing it's a big joint subjugation request. Looking pretty satisfied, she acts like she's just done them a massive favor. Hirotaka repeats the name of the request, sounding pretty confused by the whole idea. Pushing up her glasses, the receptionist explains it's a special call 2 arms from monsters that are way too tough for a normal squad to handle. Instead of looking worried, Gisela sticks her tongue out and treats the whole situation like a big joke. Then she drops the real news. The target they're hunting is a massive, legendary dragon. Hirotaka and the girls freeze in place, their faces going totally blank as the word dragon finally sinks in. Seeing their shocked expressions, he tentatively asks if the creatures are really that rare. Lisa and Sarah immediately start panicking, explaining that these are basically fairy tale monsters no one actually sees. In their entire time traveling, they've never even heard of a successful dragon hunt happening. Shrugging off the tension, Gisela grins and says a dragon is actually the perfect training partner for someone trying to get stronger. Even the receptionist chips in, mentioning that with so many veterans involved, the payout is going to be massive. The mention of a huge payout has Hirotaka thinking the job might actually be worth the trouble. He admits he's a bit curious to see a real dragon, though Sarah is mostly just wondering if the meat is edible. Thinking about the scale of the hunt, he asks if the guild plans to bring in the army to help with the numbers. Lisa shakes her head, explaining that soldiers are strictly controlled by the local lords, because moving a whole battalion would just freak out the neighboring territories. They have to keep it strictly an adventurer-led mission. Hirotaka nods along, realizing this world has just as many complicated political rules as his old one. He turns to Lisa and mentions how impressed he is that she knows so much about the local lords. Looking a bit flustered, she quickly claims she only overheard the info by chance until a calm voice cuts her off. A mysterious woman steps into view, pointing out that of course Lisa knows these things since it involves her own family. The figure stands tall in a long white cloak, looking like they just stepped out of a high-class temple. While Hirotaka tries to figure out who the stranger is, the rest of the group goes dead silent. Liza looks like she's seen a ghost, trembling as she recognizes her former teacher. Seeing the change in her expression, Hirotaka freezes, realizing this isn't a friendly visit. Finally, the man fixes a sharp gaze on her and says he's tracked her down. He stands there with a calm, steady posture, waiting for Liza to say something. Stunned by the encounter, Hirotaka asks about this teacher and what he meant by her family home. Beside him, she keeps her eyes fixed on the floor, paralyzed by the man's presence. The man steps closer and speaks her full name Liza Montaigu, confirming her noble identity for everyone to hear. He goes on to explain she's actually the future court magician and the daughter of the family ruling these lands. Hearing this, Hirotaka nearly jumps, shouting out in shock at the news. He just stares at her, finally piecing together that his friend is a high-ranking lady. When he asks why she kept it a secret, Liza can't even look him in the eye. The teacher sighs, acting like it's common sense to know who owns the land while mocking their ignorance. Still, Gisela doesn't like the attitude, pointing out that he's clearly trying to make them look like idiots. The receptionist peeks over the counter, her face turning pale as she realizes who they're dealing with. This is Archanglow, a legendary court mage known as the Grey Sage for his ability to use every kind of magic. Panicking, Lorna worries his heavy presence alone might be enough to get the entire guild flattened. Even Hirotaka stands there in shock, realizing someone that famous was practically right under their noses. Archanglow doesn't even acknowledge the crowd, simply looking down at Liza and telling her they're going back to the Montaigu house. She just stares back at him with wide, terrified eyes, completely frozen by his presence. Without a word, he reaches out his gloved hand toward her. Snapping his hand shut around her wrist, he makes it clear her time as a runaway is over. But Hirotaka isn't about to let that happen, reaching out and grabbing the man's arm to stop him. Gritting his teeth, he tells him to wait, arguing that taking her away against her will is just wrong. Archon looks back with a cold, unimpressed stare, asking who he is even supposed to be. To him, this is strictly private Montaigu family business, and he warns the outsider to stay out of it. Hirotaka refuses to back down, insisting that since Liz is part of their guild, they aren't going to just stand by and watch her be taken. Lorna jumps in to help, though she mostly and thus yells at the guy for looking pale and asks if he is even eating right. Instead of getting angry, the sage just stares back with a cold, empty expression. Suddenly, his gaze sharpens as a strange magical light flashes deep in his eye. As the pressure mounts, he freezes, realizing things are about to get serious. Archon calls out restraint, and thick chains of light suddenly wrap around him, pinning him where he stands. He freezes on the spot, his eyes wide as the magic takes hold. No matter how much he tries to flex his fingers, his body refuses to obey. Gisela watches the glowing links, noting that this binding magic is on a completely different level. Still standing calmly, the mage warns that resisting will only result in broken bones. Lizzie calls out to her friends in a panic, watching helplessly as the pressure in the room continues to rise. Across from her, Hirotaka grunts in frustration, still pinned down by those magical chains. Archon ignores the noise and asks why someone of her high status is wasting her life in a dump like this. She just stares back at him in silence, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hurt. Trembling, she finally finds her voice and begs her former teacher to stop. Archon doesn't budge, telling her she didn't just leave, she ran away from her own destiny. As the harsh words sink in, her eyes go wide. Her mind drifts back to when she was a tiny girl, standing alone in front of the massive family gates. Since she was born into the Montaigu house with legendary talent, her path was already set. She was meant to be the next court magician. She spent her entire childhood mastering magic and hitting the books. Following the plan came naturally to her, and for a while, her life seemed pretty straightforward. Then everything changed on her 10th birthday. The family arranged a massive showcase to measure her true magical strength. During the ceremony, she realized she was being treated like a prize instead of a person. Dozens of eyes tracked her every move while the crowd gossiped about her massive potential. Looking pale and shaken, Lizzie finally felt the true weight of her family's expectations. Under the gaze of the crowd, the pressure became too much and caused her magic to snap, trashing the entire hall. That trauma left her with a crushing fear of failure, making her magic go haywire ever since. Archon asks her point blank if she ever considered his feelings or her father's when she decided to run away. Looking at her trembling face, he wonders if she hasn't made them suffer enough already. She can only hang her head in silence, whispering a tearful apology to her old teacher. Turning toward Hirotaka, she admits she was just a coward fleeing her duties, figuring she was never actually useful. She even apologizes for keeping the truth hidden, while he stands there listening in silence. A long, heavy sigh escapes him. Looking away, he admits he really hates hearing her talk like this. It's frustrating for him to realize he knew nothing about his friend's pain or how much she was truly struggling. He looks her in the eye with a gentle smile, telling her that what she went through must have been incredibly painful. It's a kind voice, saying that even choosing to run away couldn't have been easy. Lizzie just stares up at him, her eyes wide with shock as he tells her she actually did a great job. Standing nearby, Archon watches the two of them with a stone-cold expression. Her pupils dilate as the weight of those words finally hits home. Then, he slowly reaches out toward her. Just as Hirotaka reaches out, Archon taps his foot and starts a teleportation spell. A massive magic circle glows under him and Lizzie, ready to whisk them away. Lorna recognizes the light and shouts that it's high-level spatial magic. She panics, realizing they're about to lose Lizzie for good. Trying to move, she suddenly stops as she senses something strange about Hirotaka's power. He grinds his teeth and pulls at the glowing chains, refusing to let them go. Archon just looks down at him with a cold stare, telling him that fighting back is pointless. Archon insists the restraint magic is unbreakable, especially for a weak adventurer from a bottom-tier guild. Ignoring the insult, Hirotaka just clenches his jaw and pours every ounce of strength into his limbs. He refuses to let them thus walk away with Lizzie. As the pressure builds, a sharp metallic crack echoes through the air. Archon freezes on the spot, his eyes going wide as he realizes someone is actually breaking through his high-level spell. Archon stares in disbelief at the cracks forming in his magic, while Hirotaka quietly admits he understands the situation. Even with her family responsibilities waiting back home, he isn't ready to let her walk away just yet. Liza watches him in silence as he remembers how she gave him a place to belong when he had no one. Suddenly, he yells that staying with him and the guild is her real duty. The pressure becomes too much, and the glowing chains finally shatter into pieces. Archon freezes on the spot, unable to process his high-level magic being broken so easily. Just like that, his control is gone, and he's left staring in disbelief. Seizing the moment while Archon is frozen, Hirotaka lunges forward and catches Liza before she can drift away. He pulls her into a tight embrace, shielding her as the remaining magical shards rain down and vanish into thin air. Archon's eye trembles in shock as he tries to process his high-level binding magic being torn apart like paper. He stammers to himself, unable to understand how someone could survive that kind of magical force without a scratch. Hirotaka meets his gaze with a steady, confident look. He admits that his body is thankfully a little different from the average person's, which is why the magic didn't break him. He keeps a steady hand on Liza's shoulder to make sure she's really okay. Softening his voice, he asks if she's alright and apologizes for being so reckless with the rescue. Still, he points out that he hasn't actually heard how she feels about everything yet. She stares at him in surprise, clearly moved that he's leaving the final choice to her. Waiting for her to find her voice, he keeps a respectful distance. Across the room, Archon just stands there watching them with a cold, steady gaze. Taking a deep breath, she steps forward to face her relative head-on. She looks Archon right in the eye, thanking him for everything he's taught her since she was a kid. While her dream was always to go home and become a court mage, she realizes her priorities have shifted. She trails off for a second, stealing her resolve before giving her answer. Shouting with a new sense of purpose, she tells him she wants to stay with the Garoctas Guild. Even if she keeps messing up, she's sure this is the only place she can truly grow. Archon stares at her for a long moment, admitting it's been years since she actually showed this much backbone. He looks down, seemingly coming to terms with her choice. Still, Liza starts to fidget, admitting she feels guilty for lying to the guild about her noble identity this whole time. Rachel S. brushes it off with a smirk, reminding her that she literally attacked the party before joining them. Since she's still here, a few secrets aren't going to ruin their friendship. Hirotaka shouts that it's obviously fine, shutting down any remaining worries about her secrets. Giving her a bright grin, he makes it clear that he's just happy to have her back. Lorna offers a warm smile to show she agrees. When she sees how much they truly care, Liza's eyes well up in silent disbelief. Still, Lorna mentions that Liza has been making great progress with her magic training lately. To lighten the mood, Hirotaka jokes that her healing is so good it even makes skin look better. Lorna jumps in to back him up, loudly declaring that Liz is a brilliant mage. Since she considers herself a magic genius, she figures her opinion is basically law. Watching her outburst, Archon calmly admits that he is already well aware of his relative's talent. He explains that Liza was granted the blessing of chakra, a rare gift that guarantees a mage has incredible potential. Hearing that name makes Lorna freeze in surprise while Liza just looks on humbly. As Archon explains how this blessing makes her holy magic so high level, Hirotaka just watches them, feeling like he's missing a major part of the conversation. Archon explains his goal was to polish her talent and turn her into a top-tier royal mage. Listening quietly, Hirotaka sees the man finally start to drop his guard. As he watches, the noble's expression shifts from anger to something more serious. Standing tall, Archon tells them that if they're this stubborn, they'll have to prove the guild is actually the right place for her. Liza can only stare at him with wide eyes, stunned by the sudden proposal. Finally, he brings up the dragon hunt they discussed earlier, setting it as their ultimate test. Archon tells them flat out that they need to be the ones to bring him the dragon's head. While Lisa looks pretty nervous about the idea, he isn't finished with his conditions yet. He keeps a cold, steady gaze as he lays out the stakes. If they fail, or if another group gets to it first, she is going home, and just like they originally planned. Looking away, he admits that mastering her special blessing should make this possible. Still, he insists he can't leave her with a party that can't handle a mission like this. Liza steps up and shouts that she take on the challenge, even if he thinks it's impossible. Her sudden burst of energy leaves the others stunned, but they quickly line up right beside her. Archon just stares at them for a long moment, looking for any sign of hesitation. Seeing none, he simply closes his eyes and gives in. He turns and walks out without another word, leaving the group to figure out how they're actually going to hunt a dragon. He adds that he'll be back once the hunt is over, promising to stall the rest of the family for now. Watching him go, Lizzie calls out to her teacher one last time. With tears in her eyes, she thanks him for the chance and apologizes for being such a handful. Archon doesn't say anything else, though a soft, almost sad look crosses his face as his image blurs. Finally, he disappears completely, leaving the three of them alone in the quiet room to figure out their next move. Kyan breaks the silence with a grin, saying they really don't have a choice but to go for it. Smirking, Lorna says she's itching for a fight, but a loud rumble from her stomach makes it clear she's actually hungry. Lisa looks down and grips her dress, promising herself that she finally mastered the power hidden inside her. Her eyes are full of focus as she realizes she can get even stronger than she is now. With their minds made up, the whole guild house shakes as they shout together about taking that dragon's head. The guild house practically vibrates with all that cheering. Inside a quiet room nearby, a discarded maid uniform and some shoes sit on the floor, suggesting someone has been eavesdropping on the whole conversation. The mysterious woman smirks to herself, finding the guild's sudden burst of motivation pretty entertaining. Watching through the window, she keeps her eyes on the group as they celebrate their new mission. The house sits peacefully in the woods, tucked away from the rest of the world. Then, the camera pans out over the mountains where their next challenge awaits. High up in those peaks, a massive slitted eye snaps open. The beast looms over the jagged landscape, letting its dark wings stretch wide against the cold wind. Suddenly, it takes off into the sky with enough force to shake the very air. Up close, the dragon looks more like a feathered beast than a simple lizard, sporting massive spiraling horns and thick scales. Its eyes are sharp and focused, making it clear this isn't just some mindless animal. Letting out a roar that echoes across the sky, it dives back into the clouds and vanishes from sight. Miles away from those mountains, a quiet town building sits in the afternoon sun. Inside, a stylish adventurer pulls a wanted poster off the wall and tells his team they're going after the beast. When the rest of the group hears the plan, they just stand there in silent disbelief. Still, they aren't exactly thrilled, grumbling that dragons are just giant lizards and traveling that far is a huge pain. The leader snaps back, asking if they'd like to be kicked out for their constant complaining. Fed up with the attitude, one of the members reminds him he was the one living in luxury, so he shouldn't lump them together. Looking down at his team, the leader decides he is far too special to ever live as a worthless background character. He is certain he's the most superior person in this world and plans to make everyone acknowledge it. Finally, his expression darkens as he wonders who would dare try to steal his glory. He mutters that the idea of someone else taking his prize is simply unforgivable, staring down with narrowed eyes. Meanwhile, Edgar stays blissfully unaware of the looming threat. With a bright grin, he focuses solely on taking the beast's head to save Lisa's future. The day of the dragon hunt finally arrives at a wide valley surrounded by snowy peaks. Edgar scans the crowd at the meeting spot, surprised to see so many tough adventurers gathered for the same goal. As he takes in the scene, he notices the small winged girl has followed him and asks what she's even doing there. She just gives him a cheeky grin, admitting she came because dragons are a rare sight and she didn't want to miss the show. He doesn't say a word, just giving her a flat, silent look before they move out. As they step into the clearing, Edgar spots a group of adventurers already pointing and laughing his way. They make sure he hears them too, mocking him as a figurehead hero who's just wasting everyone's time. While he stands there trying to process the insults, Lisa leans in and warns him that plenty of these guys are us looking for a fight. One man in a bandana keeps at it, loudly complaining about how annoying it is to have dead weight around. Hearing that, Edgar just freezes, looking totally blindsided by the sudden hostility. He quickly snaps out of his shock and gets right in the guy's face, demanding to know who he's calling a burden. He doesn't notice the crowd realizing this rival is actually a famous adventurer named Kenichi. Kenichi just looks down at him with pure disgust. He calmly asks if Edgar is actually too slow to understand what's being said. The insult makes something snap, and Edgar's eye starts to twitch with rage. Completely losing his cool, he lunges forward with a shout, promising to end the guy right then and there. The rival leader catches the strike without breaking a sweat, stopping the blade cold before it can even get close. Looking completely bored, he doesn't even bother with a proper stance as he holds the boy back. He lets their blades vibrate under the pressure and casually mentions he has no time for someone so incompetent. Edgar stares back in shock as the guy warns him to get lost if he's going to be a nuisance. Ralph snaps at the guy, yelling that he only picks easy jobs with big payouts. He mocks the idea of Kenichi being a hero since he didn't lift a finger when the Demon King actually appeared. Without even looking back, Kenichi simply tells him to go home already. He heads toward his own party, calling the whole argument a waste of time. Scott scratches his head from the sidelines, muttering about how bothersome the situation has become. Watching them leave, Edgar realizes that even after all this time, those guys haven't changed one bit. He just starts snacking, completely unbothered by the drama. Seeing that they aren't exactly welcome, his companion suggests they should probably just pack it in and go home. Nearby, a sharp-eyed teammate scowls in disgust, complaining that being associated with losers like them makes him look bad. Fed up with the constant complaining, Edgar suddenly grabs the guy by his scarf. He admits he was dragged to this world against his will, so he's done hearing about missions and special skills. Kenichi ignores the rant, focusing instead on the task at hand. Leading his group away, he mentions this hunt offers the biggest reward they've seen yet. He figures if they want to live large, hitting big targets is way more efficient than doing small-time jobs. As the group disappears, Ralph asks if Edgar actually knows them, since the tension between them was so heavy. Nodding slowly, he admits they're his old teammates who actually kicked him out. Ralph screams in surprise at the mention of him being exiled. Still, he just shrugs it off, admitting he was pretty pathetic before he met the rest of the group. He thinks about Kenichi's skill that blocks every hit, realizing the guy is even more of a threat than he thought. Turning to the group, Edgar tells everyone they need to step up because the competition is getting tough. Meanwhile, some nearby adventurers start whispering about a person who was kicked out of the hero's party. They claim a guy named Hirotaka was actually the one who defeated the Demon King, which leaves Edgar standing there in total confusion. Another guy laughs it off, insisting there is no way a rumor like that could be true. He still thinks the kid is just a loser who got stuck with a completely useless skill. Ignoring the gossip, Edgar shouts for the dragon to come out so he can prove his worth once and for all. Just as the challenge leaves his mouth, a massive shadow suddenly stretches across the mountain and turns the day into night. A giant, scaled tail sweeps through the air right above them, confirming that the dragon is finally showing itself. Looking around in a daze, the rest of the group freezes as they try to process the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Ralph stares up at the sky and realizes the beast they were looking for has arrived. The beast sweeps down, its massive body blotting out the sun as it looms over the mountain path. It fixes the tiny figures below with a cold, predatory stare. Standing there in its shadow, they finally see the scale of the fight they just picked. Edgar calls out to Rachel to get her moving. Launching herself into the sky, she uses her wind spring skill to kick up a massive gust of air. a direct hit, swirling right around the dragon's huge wings. While the magic flies, Edgar watches from the ground with a tight expression. He starts to trail off, realizing he might actually recognize the figure jumping into the fray. Sure enough, Hirotaka dives headfirst through the air to get a clear shot at the monster's neck. Nearby, an aggressive rival shouts that he's claiming the trophy for himself. The beast doesn't take the bait, snapping its massive jaws toward the hero in a sudden blare. He looks stunned, barely processing how a creature that size can move so fast. Still, he manages to keep his cool and readies a mana break to stop the next lunge. The dragon strikes with a massive crash that blows everything back. He is sent tumbling through the air like a ragdoll, skidding across the grass while Liz screams his name. Miraculously, he's actually fine, though he's currently busy crying about how much his face hurts. Once the shock wears off, he stares at his sword in disbelief, unable to figure out why his mana break failed to stop the beast. The mysterious woman in his head explains that the dragon's fire, it actually made of magic, which is why his skill did absolutely nothing. Gritting his teeth, he realizes he can't rely on his usual tricks to survive this. It's a tough realization to have in the middle of a life-or-death struggle. Watching a massive blast of heat erupt, the group realizes this beast operates on a completely different level. Still, he manages to snap back and warn the others to stay sharp for the next strike. He barely finishes the sentence before his eyes widen in shock. As the dragon lets out a bone-chilling roar, it towers over them to finish the job. Suddenly, the dragon's shadow is replaced by a massive, horned man stepping onto the mountain path. He looks completely unfazed by the chaos, mentioning that he finally found his target. Glaring with a terrifying intensity, he mutters a single name, Gisela. Hirotaka can only stare in disbelief, unable to process why a person is standing right where the dragon should be. He starts screaming immediately, fuming about how tiny everyone is and how much trouble he had finding them. The guys in the back look like they're ready to faint just from the sheer volume of his voice. While he rants about how real men are supposed to be massive, the winged girl just covers her ears, looking completely fed up with the noise. Staring in a cold sweat, Hirotaka can barely find his voice to process the chaos unfolding in front of him. He eventually manages to ask if she actually knows this lunatic. Instead of a direct answer, she gives him a cryptic smirk and says he probably already knows exactly who he's looking at. He is Tristan, the Demon King of Wrath. The surrounding adventurers start whispering, clearly terrified by the name alone. Breaking into a cold sweat, Hirotaka thinks this is a pretty cruel joke for the universe to play. He stands there in silence, trying to process the scale of the threat. Instead of running, the rival leader starts smirking. He figures taking down a demon king would make him a legend overnight. While the rival plots his fame, Hirotaka watches the giant's back and realizes the situation just went from bad to impossible. Tristan turns around, his eyes wide and full of a scary, hungry energy. Frozen in place, he sweats bullets while trying to withstand that gaze. Pointing a finger, the giant asks Rachel if this is the man holding the magic sword. She just smirks and leans on his shoulder, casually mentioning she is giving him the sword because she is quitting her position as a demon king. When he hears that, Hirotaka snaps, yelling at her for dropping such insane news in front of their enemy. Tristan just stands there with a blank, stunned expression, trying to process the fact that Rachel wants to quit her job right in front of him. Behind him, Hirotaka looks like his soul is leaving his body, but Rachel stays perfectly calm. Tipping his head down, Tristan warns her that being a demon king in a title you just walk away from. He thinks she needs to show the world what that kind of power actually looks like. As he raises a hand, the air starts to crackle with a dangerous weight. Hirotaka sees the shift and screams for everyone to hit the dirt before things get ugly. Tristan raises one hand, gathering a massive swirling ball of darkness that dwarfs everything around him. Standing like a god of ruin, he holds up what looks like a small, angry sun made of shadow. As his eye narrows with total indifference, he simply tells them all to die. He lets the energy go, and a massive white light swallows the entire mountain range. The blast is so big it feels like the landscape is just being erased from existence. Thick clouds of dust eventually start to drift over the rubble, leaving everything silent and broken. In the middle of the wreckage, all we can hear is the sound of someone struggling to breathe. Hirotaka wonders what just happened, his lungs burning as his whole body starts to ache. Telling himself to stay calm, he tries to focus and figure out the situation. His eyes are wide and vacant, his face dripping with sweat as he finally manages to focus. When he looks around, his heart sinks. The entire mountain has been wiped clean, and his friends are scattered across the dirt, not making a sound. Hirotaka hears a faint groan and realizes some of them are actually alive. Looking across the rubble, he notices a soft light shimmering around the bodies. He recognizes the spell immediately, figuring Liz must have cast her protection magic just in time. A wave of relief hits him as he calls out her name, but then he freezes, his eyes going wide at what he sees next. Liz is sitting in the dirt, cradling an unconscious Rachel while looking up at him in total disbelief. She whispers how Rachel shielded her from the blast, realizing she's only alive because someone else took the hit. High above them, the massive ball of darkness still hangs in the sky, making the survivors look like tiny specks against the ruin. Hirotaka can barely move, his face twisted in a mix of pain and shock as he watches her. Suddenly, a memory of Liza's teacher flashes back, reminding her of a moment they shared long ago. Looking back at her fallen friend, her expression starts to shift from total despair to a quiet, burning resolve. She hears her teacher's voice again, telling Liza that she's the only one who can master Sakura's protection and save everyone. Her teacher gives her a warm smile, telling Liza that she definitely has what it takes. Back in the present, those words echo in her mind as a final plea to save Hirotaka. He stands among the ruins, his eyes wide as he realizes everyone is still alive. Suddenly, Hirotaka shouts at the top of his lungs that it's all thanks to her, though she still can't help but feel like she failed. He asks her to focus on healing the group and keeping her protection spells active, promising he'll handle the Demon King himself. She finally finds her resolve and gives him a firm nod, agreeing to do her part. Just then, the mysterious woman floats down behind him to mock the idea of a human fighting back, warning that Tristan won't stop until he burns everything to ash. Leaning in with a smug grin, she adds that it's basically impossible for a normal guy to win unless he happens to be a Demon King too. He just glares back at her, calling out the name Gisera with pure venom in his voice. But his voice dies in his throat when a massive shadow looms over him. Tristan is suddenly standing right there, tall and silent. His eyes go wide and his body locks up, unable to even move a muscle. Staring down with total contempt, the Demon King simply calls him weak. Then, a brutal strike catches him off guard, sending him crashing into the jagged rocks. Tristan towers over him, repeatedly screaming about how weak and pathetic everyone is. Gritting his teeth against the shock, Hirotaka tries to stay conscious, but he stays pinned against the rubble while the Demon King looms over his broken body like he's just a bug. Suddenly, Tristan throws his head back and roars, furious that such a small fry is even still breathing. Nearby, Gisera just sits back and watches the one-sided beating with a bored, smug expression. Hacking and coughing, Hirotaka can barely find the strength to move. He stares at the snow, realizing this is what it actually looks like when a Demon King gets serious. As the pain sinks in, he admits to himself that winning feels completely impossible. Meanwhile, Tristan looks down at Liza with total disgust, calling the party nothing but trash that doesn't know when to quit. He lets out a jagged laugh, clearly enjoying how hopeless they look. Ignoring the insults, Lizzie grips her staff tightly as a strange light begins to pulse around her. Her eyes go wide, sensing a power she has never felt before. Seeing the light, Hirotaka screams her name, his voice cracking from the strain. Blooded and desperate, he calls out for a contract to be made between them right now. While he struggles, Gisera just watches with a smug look. Suddenly, a quiet voice breaks the silence, simply saying no. His eyes go wide, and he stands there in total shock as the rejection sinks in. Still facing away from him, she feels like she's already a world away. Looking down at the ground, she seems to have made a choice she can't take back. Tristan, uninterested in her silence, screaming that weaklings like her should just hurry up and die. Just then, a massive pillar of energy surges upward with a deafening roar. Hirotaka can only stare in disbelief, his face going completely pale as the pressure builds. In the middle of the chaos, Liza quietly asks him if he remembers the very first time they met. Specifically, she remembers him saying her feelings were a better medicine than any magic. Liza smiles through her tears, telling him how much she loves his kindness. But she explains that if he makes a contract with a magic sword, he might stop being the person she knows. Looking away, she tells him she doesn't want him to do anything unnecessary or make a sacrifice like that. She even warns him that if he actually became a demon king, she would end up hating him for it. Hirotaka just stares at her in shock, unable to do anything but call out her name. Tristan watches the scene with a bored look, calling the whole emotional moment pathetic. He tells them to die with regret while they still have the chance. With a simple flick of his finger, he releases another crushing wave of energy. The impact sends the party flying through the air like ragdolls. But suddenly, Liza's eyes snap wide open as she screams for a protection barrier, pouring everything she has into a final defense. She doesn't stop at one, stacking protection and healing spells until the air thickens with magic. It's a relentless barrage, a desperate wall built against the impossible. Amidst the noise, she hears her teacher's voice promising that she's capable of this. The woman just smiles, reminding her that talent like hers doesn't just disappear when things get hard. Liza's eyes go wide as she finally accepts the truth. She remembers standing in the ruins of her home, finally admitting that she always knew about the absolute power hidden inside her. The source of that strength was never a mystery to her. As her teacher watches, she sees the girl is already struggling with the weight of her own potential. Looking back now, she apologizes for being so scared and keeping her eyes closed for all these years. Reaching out to the power she once feared, she hugs the memory of her younger self and finally asks for strength. Then, the whole world just turns white as a massive pillar of energy erupts from her body, tearing across the snowy ground. Watching the light, Tristan's confident smirk finally vanishes as he realizes something has changed. Disera can only stand there in silence, completely overwhelmed by the sudden pressure filling the air. As the others shield their eyes, Hirotaka looks up in pure shock at the transformation taking place. He can feel a divine presence washing over the battlefield, wondering if he is actually looking at a goddess. The light clears to show the massive form of Sakura, towering over the snowy peaks. Liza floats calmly in the center of the entity, her hands clasped as if she's finally at peace with her power. Looking down with a serene expression, the goddess opens her giant hands, ready to turn the tide against Tristan. Liza whispers a prayer, asking the Holy Mother Sakura to keep everyone safe. As she speaks, a complex crest flickers deep within her eye. Reaching down with a massive, gentle hand, the goddess bathes the snowy peak in a bright, warm light. The party members begin to float, feeling the pain and weight of their injuries vanish instantly. Hirotaka just stares up in total silence, watching his wounds close while the divine aura surrounds them. The goddess spreads her hands, keeping the party safely tucked inside a sphere of light as Liza stands firm at the center. Looking up from below, Tristan recognizes the divine form and grits his teeth in frustration. His eyes narrow with rage at the thought of a human having this much power. Hirotaka can only watch from the ground, completely stunned by the sight. Clasping her hands, Liza prays for just a bit more strength so she can finally end this battle. Her eyes go completely wide as she demands the power to stop Tristan once and for all. Noticing the terrifying shift in the air, the Demon King starts sweating, his arrogant smirk long gone. Hirotaka just stands there in total shock, unable to process the pressure coming from his friend. Even Gisera looks ready to bolt, finally realizing they've pushed Liz away too far. Then, a massive roar of energy splits the silence as she lets it all out in one blinding flash. The light solidifies into a huge palm that slams into Tristan, sending him reeling back from the blow. He grits his teeth in shock, looking dazed by the sudden impact. Watching from below, Liza stares him down with glowing eyes and finally admits she is just plain angry. Tristan lets out a desperate roar, but it doesn't do him any good. Suddenly, the giant goddess brings its palms together in a thunderous clap, catching him right in the center. He coughs and sputters as the pressure hits him, unable to escape the crushing force. Watching the carnage, Kenichi just stands there shaking, barely able to even stutter her name. Sakura tightens her grip, the stone-like pressure of her hands grinding against the man's body. Looking down at him, she asks if he is really that upset, her voice completely flat as she holds him like a doll. Tristan doesn't take the mockery well. When he screams about her talking down to a demon king, his face twists into a monstrous mask. Suddenly, he forces himself free and hovers in the air, glaring at her with pure hatred. Tristan tells them not to get cocky, his hands sparking with dark energy as he prepares to strike back. Roaring that they can't kill him, he releases a massive wave of power that tears across the air. The sheer force of the blast slams into Sakura's divine form, shaking the ground with a heavy rumble. Lizzie grits her teeth, feeling the pressure mount as she struggles to keep the manifestation steady. Tristan scowls, muttering about how much she's getting on his nerves. Despite the sweat on her face, she tells him that Sakura is their guardian god and his attacks won't work on them. He suddenly asks what she's so confused about, making her freeze as the tension shifts. Standing tall, the Demon King clarifies that he isn't actually mad just because his attack was blocked. Instead, he calls her shallow and warns that manifesting a literal god comes with a price she can't even begin to calculate. She is hunched over and gasping for air, the strain of the summon clearly taking its toll. Looking down at her, Tristan asks if she actually has a death wish. Hirotaka watches from the side, looking stunned by how much she is pushing herself. Still, she keeps her head down, her face hidden behind her hair as she tries to catch her breath. He points out that she's burning through her mana weight fast with these massive moves, only a matter of time before she hits zero. Despite the warning, she looks up with a sharp glint in her eye. She tells him she only needs to hold out long enough for Hirotaka to find a way to win. Tristan sneers at her confidence, asking why she thinks his flames are limited to just magic. Seeing her shocked expression, he explains his power actually draws from both mana and his own life force. Since he fuels his flames with his very body, he can basically keep burning for eternity. Just then, he calls out to the fire god Garla and begins a final incantation. The sky turns pitch black as he prepares to wipe every single person off the map. A massive sphere called Cosmic Meteor swirls in the center of the darkness. Tristan laughs like a maniac, bragging that his spell can wipe out a whole mountain. He dares Liza's guardian god to try and survive it. As the heavy weight begins its descent, the entire ground starts to shake. Liza watches in horror, her voice trembling as she calls out for Sakura. Beside her, Hirotaka stands his ground, though they both look dwarfed by the scale of the coming explosion. Liza bows low and whispers an apology to the god she summoned, sensing she's finally reached her limit. Meanwhile, Hirotaka takes to the air, refusing to let the battle end like this. Landing right in the center of the chaos, he figures that if it's just a matter of magic, there's no need to call on a god for help. When his eyes widen in a focused stare, he grips his weapon and prepares a technique called mana break. He unleashes a massive swing that shreds the very air, cutting straight through the meteor's pressure to stop the impact. The impact leaves his gaze sharper than ever, showing he isn't planning on backing down. Watching him closely, Tristan narrows his eyes, clearly surprised the kid survived his best shot. Hirotaka stands in the middle of the crater, gripping his blade while the demon wonders how a mere human is swinging a magic sword with that much control. It's a complete shift in the air. When Liza calls out his name in a daze, he simply tells her to quit trying to handle everything by herself. Still, Tristan just keeps staring, unable to wrap his head around the guy's power. He breaks the silence by asking how the kid even knows about Japan, let alone has such a traditional name. Hirotaka freezes on the spot, stunned that a monster would even recognize that word. Suddenly, Tristan bursts out laughing, looking genuinely shocked to run into a fellow countryman in the middle of a war zone, spreading his arms wide. He admits he was originally Japanese too, having arrived in this world over 100 years ago. Tristan smirks, figuring that since they share the same homeland, Hirotaka will appreciate the charm of what's coming next. Hearing that number makes Hirotaka's head spin, and he can barely process the idea of someone living for over a century. Suddenly, the demon tilts his head back and opens his mouth as wide as it can go, eyes glowing a blank white. Hirotaka freezes in place, staring as the monster's throat begins to bulge. A disgusting, wet sliding sound echoes through the crater as he watches in horror. Something dark and metallic starts to poke out from the back of the monster's throat. Reaching into his own gullet, Tristan slowly draws a katana out of his body and asks if it isn't a beautiful sight. He holds the dark blade with a jagged grin, clearly at home with the weapon. He calls it the Demon Sword Legion, treating the cursed blade like a prized trophy. Standing tall with his hand on the hilt, he seems eager to show Hirotaka exactly what a century of experience looks like. Hirotaka stares at the weapon in disbelief, admitting he has never actually seen a real Japanese sword before. Finding the reaction hilarious, Tristan asks how that's even possible. He clarifies that he actually comes from a version of Japan much further in the future. Explaining that the era of the shogunate is long gone, he leaves Hirotaka looking completely lost. Still, he brushes the confusion aside, saying the history lesson doesn't really matter right now. Settling into a wide stance, he tightens his grip on the hilt. Tristan has been wondering for a long time which demon sword would come out on top in a real fight. He flashes a jagged grin, suggesting they settle things like two Japanese men in a proper duel to the death. Tristan is itching to see how his legion stacks up against Hirotaka's blade, Osoro. Squaring off in the middle of the desolate crater, both men keep their weapons ready and eyes locked. It's a tense, quiet moment as the wind sweeps across the empty wasteland. Watching from the sidelines, Kenichi and the others are just relieved to still be in one piece after that massive blast. Kenichi shouts for him to run, arguing that there's no way they can win against something like this. Staring into the distance, Hirotaka barely seems to hear him as his mind tries to make sense of the situation. The idea of running away doesn't seem to click, since he hasn't proven he's even worth anything yet. He can't bring himself to turn his back on the fight. Kenichi catches his eye and realizes he isn't going to budge. Sighing in frustration, he tells him to just do whatever he wants before walking off. Hirotaka looks back on the day he was summoned, thinking that being chosen by this world was proof he finally had some worth. It was supposed to be a sign that he was special. Still, he can't help but wonder why it feels like no one is actually looking at him. Those thoughts vanish the moment their blades clash, with Tristan leaning in and putting everything into the strike. Laughing wildly, the horned man shouts that there isn't any time to catch a breath. Hirotaka skids across the dirt, gritting his teeth as he tries to handle the sheer force of the blow. He recovers quickly, throwing his weight into a parry that catches the demon sword mid-swing. The metal screeches as both men refuse to back down. Tristan stares him down with a terrifying focus, making Hirotaka's eyes go wide as he feels the weight behind the attack. Peering over the flat of his massive blade, Hirotaka finally finds his resolve. He tells the swordsman to stop looking past him and focus on who he's actually fighting. Kenichi rushes over, looking relieved to see that the swordsman is still in one piece after the blast. He's all smiles, praising the skill that neutralized the attack and suggesting they team up to finish the job. Instead of agreeing, Hirotaka suddenly grabs his teammate and tosses him clear of the area. The move sends the kid tumbling, and he shouts out in confusion, asking what the hell is going on. Glancing back with a cold stare, Hirotaka tells him that line belongs to him instead. Alone in the center of the crater, He turns back toward the fight to stand his ground. From across the crater, Tristan wonders why a talentless nobody would even try to stand against a demon king. Arch and Glow keeps that calm smile on his face as he asks Hirotaka to hand over the sword. Frozen in place, the swordsman can only stare back in confusion. He explains that a talentless nobody shouldn't be lugging around such a high-tier weapon anyway. Since Arch and Glow believes he is the one truly chosen to save this world, he insists the blade belongs to him. Silence hangs over the massive crater while he waits for an answer. Arch and Glow breaks the silence by pointing out that the sword clearly has power. Holding his gear, Hirotaka just stands there with a confused look, wondering where this lecture is coming from. The blonde guy adds that the weapon is the only thing giving his opponent any value, gritting his teeth. He mutters that it's a waste, since the power doesn't actually belong to someone so talentless. Suddenly, he lunges forward and barks at Hirotaka to stop acting so high and mighty. Hirotaka yells back, telling him to knock it off because they should be working together against the real threat. Instead of listening, the guy just gets more heated, saying that relaxed attitude is what's really getting on his nerves. Tristan calls Archon a clueless idiot for interfering, telling him to stop ruining a real duel between men. He releases a huge wave of pressure that stops both of them in their tracks. Hirotaka freezes as the air gets heavy, realizing just how dangerous this guy actually is. Archon just clicks his tongue, looking frustrated that his moment was interrupted by such a terrifying force. In the background, the girls watch with wide eyes, whispering nervously about Lord Shiakura. Tension hangs thick in the air as everyone waits to see who will survive the next strike. A massive hooded figure suddenly looms over the entire area, dwarfing everything below it. Looking up, she can only stare in shock as the giant takes over the skyline. Even as the air grows heavy, she remains rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the entity. Jagged pillars of rock burst from the ground then, tearing through the landscape with violent force. Deep inside his own mind, a single white slit tears through the darkness like a waking eye. He's ready to accept the deal, and the spirit finally begins to stir. As the contract seals, a wild mane of hair flows out behind him. Thick horns sprout from his head, showing the deal is done. Settling into a low stance, he grips the handle of his katana with a strength that isn't his own. Even as he prepares to fight, Liza suddenly collapses onto the dusty ground, her strength finally hitting its limit. She lies there completely motionless, looking like she has nothing left to give. Seeing her fall, Hirotaka rushes over to her side and calls out her name in a panic. He quickly checks on her while the battle rages in the background. Luckily, she's only passed out from the strain, which gives him a small moment of relief. Meanwhile, Tristan stands nearby and begins bragging about his demon sword, Legion. He explains that his blade is special, it can cut through anything, even divine magic or the toughest defensive barriers. His cold gaze lingers on them, making it clear that no matter what skills Hirotaka tries to use, the fight is already over. Kenichi looks down and realizes his body has been completely torn open by that last strike. He just stares in silence, his face going pale as he tries to process the damage. Despite the gruesome wound, Tristan tells him to get up, explaining that he is still looking for a real challenge. Looking down at the dying man, he seems more annoyed by the lack of resistance than anything else. He stares at Kenichi, who is lying in a massive, dark pool of blood. The poor guy's eyes are glazed over, his face looking completely drained of life. Looking up at the shadow looming over him, he asks if the final blow is finally coming. Tristan just scoffs, telling the dying man that his heroic act was a lie and that he actually hated being so weak. It's a heartless observation, leaving Hirotaka to watch the scene play out from a detached distance. Tristan mutters that he has no use for people who can't keep up, dismissing the struggle entirely. Kenichi just lies there in the dirt, barely able to keep his eyes open as the life drains out of him. With blood trickling from his mouth, it seems like he's finally reached his limit. But then, his eye snaps wide with a look of pure shock. Stunned, He pulls himself up and stares at his own torso, realizing those fatal wounds are actually closing up and healing on their own. Hirotaka explains that he granted him the immortal attribute. Looking at the results, he figures it worked out pretty well for his first attempt. Kenichi can barely wrap his head around the concept, asking why Hirotaka would even bother saving him. Giving him a steady look, Hirotaka wonders why he's even asking. He says the answer is simple. He just doesn't want to see him die. Staring blankly, Kenichi can't even begin to process the fact that he's still breathing. But the peace is short-lived as Tristan lashes out, slamming his massive arm into the ground with enough force to shatter the earth. Hirotaka shouts out his name, watching the explosion of dust from the sidelines. Looking completely fed up, Tristan groans about how annoying everyone is being right in the middle of a duel. Tristan stares down at the bodies scattered across the dirt, dismissing them as a complete nuisance. Coldly, he remarks that it was a mistake for trash like them to even be born. Hirotaka listens to every word, his grip tightening on his sword until the metal creaks. Lowering his head, he tells the man to just shut his mouth. Then he finally snaps, screaming that a selfish jerk has no right to call anyone else garbage. Kenichi stares down in total silence, unable to process that his arm is gone. His eye goes wide as the reality of the injury finally sinks in. Not even looking back, Tristan casually walks away from the severed limb. He argues that living for yourself is the only honest way to exist, claiming that helping others is just a sad excuse for losers. As Kenichi collapses into the dirt, Tristan dismisses the very idea of friendship. He calls it a pathetic label for weaklings who just take advantage of each other. Kenichi speaks up through the pain, admitting that he was actually saved by the very thing Tristan is mocking. Looking back with a confused scowl, Tristan listens as the kid explains how he lost every single thing he cared about when he first arrived in this world. Images of his comrades flash through his mind while Tristan just stands there, looking unimpressed by the sentimental talk. Still, he insists that having companions meant he wasn't lonely anymore and that alone makes him feel okay, no matter what happens to his body now. Tristan stops in his tracks, looking genuinely surprised by that answer. Nearby, Hirotaka's eyes go wide as a heavy realization hits him. In the middle of all the chaos, he wonders exactly how to form a contract with a demon sword. The little spirit explains it's actually pretty simple. Just offer some blood to the blade. Specifically, she says he needs to soak the tip of the sword in his own blood while praying for power. Seeing his reaction, she floats around with a smug grin, happy he is finally showing interest. Hirotaka looks down at the jagged weapon, weighing the cost of such a deal. He admits he likes his carefree life far too much to ever want to become a demon king. But if a time comes where he needs that strength to protect the people close to him, he knows what he has to do. He whispers a quiet apology to Lisa and Rachel, knowing he's about to cross a line he can't come back from. Plunging the sharp tip into his own arm, he decides that kindness is useless if it can't protect what matters. As his blood coats the metal, the jagged eyes along the sword's edge snap open to stare him down. He tells the blade to take everything it wants and finally make him the Demon King. Suddenly, a massive explosion of dark energy erupts from his body, swallowing him whole in a dense cloud of mana. The little spirit watches from a distance, cackling as the ritual takes hold. She flashes a wide, sharp grin and confirms the deal is officially done. Crawling out of his wound like living ink, dark energy wraps around his arm in messy coils. Still, he stays dead serious as the shadows twist over his skin. A massive, jagged wing of mana bursts from his side, signaling the birth of the new Demon King. He is no longer the human swordsman he used to be. He stands perfectly still as the transformation settles, revealing jagged black horns and a heavy cloak made of dark feathers. Gripping the organic blade, he looks ahead with a cold, steady gaze that barely seems human. While his new power pulses through the air, his calm expression makes it clear he has fully embraced his role as the Demon King. He catches the strike head-on, their blades grinding together in a shower of sparks. Even as the impact shatters the air around them, he doesn't budge an inch. Staring into those cold eyes, Tristan finally feels the weight of the situation, his expression twisting with a sudden flicker of doubt. Without a hint of emotion, he tells Tristan there won't be a single trace of him left when he's finished. He follows those words with a look of cold, focused intensity. Suddenly, the air shatters as they begin trading lightning-fast blows. Clashing in a blur of motion, he meets every one of the demon strikes head-on without giving an inch. The sound of steel hitting steel rings out constantly as they trade dozens of blows in seconds. Even as the speed picks up, he keeps a steady eye on his opponent, waiting for the right moment to end this. He lunges forward with a sharp thrust, putting the full weight of his transformation behind the organic blade. As the weapons lock, Hirotaka stays eerily still, his face showing absolutely no emotion. This cold stare clearly gets under Tristan's skin, prompting him to call out the kid for having such a cheeky look in his eyes. He launches back into the fight, gripping his gnarled blade tight as he tries to break through the kid's defense. Flashing a jagged grin, he leans in to deliver a sharp insult. He says those eyes look like a prey animal that's delusional enough to think it's the hunter. Tristan admits that even though he's annoyed, this fight actually feels pretty good. Suddenly, he lunges forward with a promise to cut him down, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks. Looking at his weapon, he asks if the kid can hear the voice of the demon sword, Legion, as it thrills at the combat. The youth stays silent and focused, watching for any opening through the chaos. Tristan lunges forward, demanding Hirotaka prove he's actually the strongest. Meeting the strike, the boy keeps his expression neutral while the blades screech against each other. He doesn't offer a comeback, choosing instead to focus every bit of his energy on the lethal dance. This silence only makes Tristan grin wider, his face twisting into a manic look as he asks if this is really the best Hirotaka can do. Before the clash can even settle, he promises to kill the boy in an instant. He makes good on the threat immediately, lunging forward with a wild, toothy grin. Hirotaka's eyes go wide as he realizes he can barely track this new level of speed. A massive, jagged black limb sweeps through the air, nearly pinning him to the spot as he twists away. Watching the frantic movement, Tristan stares with unblinking eyes, clearly enjoying every second of the chaos. He doesn't just watch for long, though, as Hirotaka lunges in with a massive overhead swing. Even with the blade screaming toward his face, Tristan keeps that crazed, unblinking look. The strike connects with a deafening blast, sending a shockwave across the desolate ground. When the smoke clears, one of the massive black limbs lies severed and smoking in the dirt. Hirotaka just rests his heavy sword on his shoulder, looking back with that same chilling calm. He just stares back, his eyes completely void of any emotion or fear. Tristan snaps at him to stop being so cocky and charges back in, looking like a dark smear across the ground. The demon sword stays steady in Hirotaka's hand, launching into a series of blindingly fast strikes. Tristan tries to reclaim the momentum through pure speed. Even with the enemy closing in, he just calmly tracks the incoming attack without flinching. He lunges forward with explosive speed, aiming right for the center of the chaos. Startled, Tristan can only watch as his opponent closes the gap in an instant. Instead of dodging the strikes, the white-haired youth simply carves through them, shredding those dark summons like they were made of paper. His eyes go wide with disbelief as he realizes his defense has been completely bypassed. Hirotaka leans in close, his face swallowed by shadows as he stares down at his opponent. Gritting his teeth, Tristan breaks into a cold sweat, realizing the power dynamic has completely flipped. His pupils shrink to tiny points from the pure pressure of the boy's presence. He barely manages to throw his blade up, catching a heavy overhead strike that shakes his entire frame. Tristan follows through with the strike, putting every bit of his strength into the downward swing. Even though the impact sends Hirotaka skidding back, the trade was worth it. The demon's arm flies off, severed clean at the elbow. Hirotaka catches his balance and looks back, his expression cold and focused. Staring at the bloody stump, Tristan realizes with a shock that his regeneration ain't working. He looks up just in time to see the youth's eyes fixed on him, radiating a new, terrifying pressure. Then, the demon is suddenly swallowed by a whirlwind of blades as Hirotaka starts a high-speed blitz from every side. The flurry of strikes finally stops, leaving him standing firm while Tristan retreats to the far side of the wasteland. Floating nearby, the small spirit chuckles and admits she's surprised he can fight this well so soon after his awakening. Tristan stares back with a sweaty grin, calling the boy's fighting style completely reckless. Realizing the blade seared his flesh, he explains that his body had to fight the intense heat before it could even start to heal. Sarah chimes in, warning him that charging in blindly just because he can heal is a bad strategy. She points out that if someone targets his neck like that, his life as a demon king will be over in an instant. He stands there quietly, repeating the word neck as he realizes just how close that call was. Looking back at her with a steady gaze, he simply admits she has a point. Tristan barks at her to stay out of the way, but she just brushes him off. She laughs that there isn't any room for a former demon king like him to be talking. After putting the old guy in his place, Hirotaka asks what else is actually possible with these demon king powers. Thinking it over, Sarah tells him he should be able to use all sorts of high-level magic. She starts a long-winded lecture about calling on gods, spirits, or even demons of temptation. Instead of listening, he begins his own ritual, pulling dark energy from the ground as he calls for his blood kin. He keeps a blank, focused expression, completely ignoring her as she screams at him to actually listen to the end of the lesson. She continues the lecture anyway, explaining that every magic chant is built from several distinct layers. The process always starts with a call to a god or spirit followed by a specific offering. Surprisingly, he actually pays attention this time, nodding along while he scribbles everything down in a notebook. Once the offering is set, she explains that you have to pick a target and a magic system before ending with the spell's name. To give him an example, she breaks down a protection spell by listing off several long-winded titles used to summon mana. He just stares back blankly, making her wish he would learn some common sense instead of just memorizing chants. Sarah catches onto his interest and offers to personally show him the ropes if he's that curious about sorcery. Rubbing his chin, he admits it's something he's been thinking about for a while. He breaks into a bright, genuine smile, explaining he just wants to understand the power they use to help him out every day. Both of them just stare back in silence, clearly caught off guard by how sweet he's being. Sarah remains collapsed in the dirt, looking completely worn out while he finishes his thought. Beside her, Archon is just as exhausted, unable to do much more than listen to him talk. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts, a massive swirl of black, ink-like energy begins tearing open the sky right above him. This is clearly the bloodkin manifesting, and its strange power dwarfs everything else on the battlefield. After a small glint of light flashes inside the void, Hirotaka looks up with a cold, focused expression. He tells them he already knows what is happening, and he seems finally done holding back. A massive, gnarled limb slams onto the ground with enough force to shake the earth. The vortex finally spits out his bloodkin, a terrifying four-armed beast with massive horns and jagged wings. It looms over him like a mountain of raw hunger, letting out a roar that rattles the air. Even though he's the one who called it, he looks like a tiny speck standing in its shadow. Instead of being intimidated, Tristan just throws his head back and laughs. He shouts that this is actually pretty good, looking more excited than he has been the entire fight. The air starts to vibrate under the pressure. The horned warrior braces himself against the massive frame looming over him. Guru towers over him like a living mountain, its muscles rippling as it prepares to crush anything in its path. Down below, Hirotaka watches with cold eyes while his own arm warps into a jagged black claw. He's fully leaning into the demonic power now, clearly ready to finish this. The summon lets out a roar that ripples through the air, drowning out everything else. Standing right by one of the beast's heavy, fur-covered legs, Hirotaka is dwarfed by the sheer size of the creature. It's a massive wall of muscle and fangs, snarling with a ferocity that makes it clear this isn't just a simple spell. Tristan is just a tiny speck in the shadow of this thing. It towers over the entire horizon, with a body of shifting, jagged energy that feels more like a natural disaster than a magic spell. Looking at the scale of it, there's no way anyone would call this a fair fight anymore. The summon zeroes in on its target, eyes locked onto Tristan. Standing his ground, he waits for the impact as dark energy gathers right in front of him. Suddenly, Guru lunges forward, swinging a colossal arm that rips right through the battlefield. While the dust settles, Hirotaka stands there watching the destruction, looking strangely calm for someone who just unleashed a nightmare. From the sidelines, Gisera watches with a sharp grin, clearly satisfied with how the power dynamic just flipped. Tristan asks him how it feels to finally wield the power of a demon king. He explains that while having this much strength makes it easy to live for yourself, he was honestly starting to get bored. Since the world is full of weaklings, he rarely gets the chance to truly cut loose. Widening his grin, he tells Hirotaka to bring even more of that murderous intent. He goes quiet for a second, almost like he's actually considering the request. Thinking back on his journey, he admits that fighting for your friends sounds like a really nice sentiment. Tristan just watches him in silence, clearly confused by the sudden shift in energy. But as a jagged black claw tears through the ground, Hirotaka admits the truth in the end. He's doing all of this for himself. That greed manifests instantly as massive slashes tear through the air, catching Tristan completely off guard. He freezes on the spot, mouth hanging open as he tries to process the speed. One look at the blackened, veiny limb tells him this isn't just a spell, it's a physical nightmare. Still reeling, he stares at the claw in total disbelief, finally realizing he's facing something far beyond a normal summon. His eye widens until the bloodshot veins show, a strained grunt escaping his throat as the pressure mounts. Looking at the boy standing calmly in the distance, he wonders what kind of monster he's actually dealing with. Nearby, the severed armored limb lies in the dirt, yet it still pulses with a terrifying will of its own. Suddenly, a massive fist crashes down, radiating a murderous intent fueled by nothing but pure greed. Amidst the dust, a ghostly image of a girl appears, as if her very existence is still tethered to this overwhelming strength. Tristan grits his teeth as the truth sinks in. Hirotaka threw his own safety aside and let his body take the blast just to land that one hit. It wasn't about protecting his friends or being a hero. Standing in the quiet of the wasteland, the demon warrior finds the whole idea ridiculous, yet he admits he once felt the exact same way. He figures this kid won't ever stop choosing the most ruthless path to get what he wants. Looking at him, Tristan admits the kid really is the perfect fit for the Demon King title. He points out that this greed is deeper than anyone he has ever met. As dark energy swirls around him, Hirotaka reaches out with a demonic hand, fully embracing the transformation. He looks more beautifully terrifying than anyone could imagine, and his focus is sharper than ever. Hirotaka lunges forward with that massive, dark hand, his gaze locked onto his target. Before Gisera can even react, the claw clamps right around his throat. Already missing an arm, the warrior struggles to keep up with the sudden strike. A sharp shockwave ripples through the air from the force of the impact. He tries to pry the dark fingers off his neck, but he's pinned down and can't escape the crushing grip. Gisera lets out a strangled roar, his face twisting in pain as the pressure builds. As the pressure peaks, Hirotaka's demonic hand starts to disintegrate into black ash. Steam hisses off his body as the transformation hits its limit, and the entire arm simply falls apart. Watching the power fade, Tristan admits it's a real shame things ended so quickly. She looks down with a serious expression, noting that while it was an impressive display, it wasn't enough to finish the job. Smoke trails off the warrior as he looms over them, barely bothered by the attack that just cost Hirotaka everything. Gisera stands tall and mocks them, explaining that the Demon King's supergeneration is exactly why that last strike failed. Looking at the dirt, Hirotaka figures he just needs to keep swinging until the damage finally sticks. Tristan shoots that down instantly, warning him that they don't have the luxury of playing the long game. The warrior ignores the chatter and slowly tightens his grip on his sword hilt, gritting his teeth in rage. He asks if the boy really thought a pathetic move like that would be enough to kill him. Without waiting for an answer, Gazeres lunges with terrifying speed, his face twisted in a manic grin. Standing his ground, Hirotaka can barely move while the attacker closes the gap. When he tries to track the movement, his eyes go wide as he realizes he's out of options. Suddenly, the demon warrior slams a hand right into his chest, the sheer force of the blow rattling his entire frame. He chokes out a pained breath, looking completely spent. Gazeres doesn't give him a second to recover, slamming a heavy blow right into his chest. The impact sends him tumbling backward, skidding through the dirt until he finally comes to a stop. Hunched over and gasping, he tries to force his limbs to respond. From across the clearing, the warrior just stands there and watches him struggle. Hirotaka's eyes go wide as the realization hits. His strength is completely gone, and he can't even move. Suddenly, the demonic spirit letting out that final roar just shatters into a million pieces. He watches as the last of that dark power dissolves into the air, leaving him completely exposed. Gazeres notices the blank look on the boy's face and asks if he's having trouble figuring out what just happened. Looking down at him with a cold stare, he tells Hirotaka that his time is officially up. He stares back in disbelief, barely able to process that his power is actually gone. Floating nearby, Tristan explains that the Demon King's energy takes a long time to settle into a new body. Since he's such a fresh host, the power is currently just a temporary boost with a strict time limit. Pointing to a visual of his empty reserves, she notes that he wasted his fuel by using massive magic and healing himself too much. One big push, and now the tank is dry. Still, he can only sweat in frustration, wishing she had warned him about the limit before he jumped into a fight. Gazeres doesn't waste any time, stepping in and snatching Hirotaka by the throat. Straining against the grip, the boy can barely breathe as the demon's hand tightens around his neck. When the demon lifts him high off the ground, he just looks bored, remarking how Hirotaka's mindless strategy ruined the fun. Trapped and helpless, he can only grit his teeth and stare back in silence. Tristan watches from a distance, realizing that if Hirotaka goes down, she is probably next on the chopping block. She figures it is better to slip away before things get even uglier. While Gazeres is busy holding him by the throat, she quietly cuts her losses and makes a run for it. He spots the escape and shouts that she is next, promising to hunt her down no matter where she hides. Gazeres tosses his katana aside, letting it thud deep into the dirt. Clicking his tongue, he mutters that the boy was a complete letdown as a host for the Demon King. Because his opponent is so weak, the warrior decides a magic sword is too good for him and opts to just crush his throat by hand. The kid gasps for air, eyes wide as his vision starts to blur. Struggling to stay conscious, he desperately wonders if there is absolutely anything left to help him. Suddenly, a sharp notification ping rings out. He stills, looking up in shock as the chime echoes through the air while he is still being held by the neck. The grip doesn't loosen, but even his attacker pauses to look around and ask what that noise was. Staring into space, the boy realizes the notification means his scrap collection skill is finally off cooldown. As he focuses on the discarded sword nearby, the system confirms the collection is starting. Even as the collection starts, Gazeres keeps a firm grip on his throat, leaving him struggling to breathe. Gasping for air, he manages to ask what it meant when the warrior called the magic sword a luxury. This gets an annoyed look from the demon, who seems confused that his prey is still trying to talk. He stares down at the boy with cold eyes, wondering how he can be so clueless about his own weakness. Flashing a sharp grin, he explains that a failed vessel like him doesn't even deserve to be killed with a magic sword. Hirotaka stares back with a sudden, sharp intensity. He repeats those words back at him, looking like he just found the perfect loophole. Stunned by the shift in energy, Gazeres freezes. He can't figure out why a guy on the brink of death is suddenly reaching out with so much confidence. That answer comes fast when the magic sword suddenly snaps into his palm. Before the warrior can even blink, the blade is already pressed tight against his throat. He freezes on the spot, his eyes wide as he tries to understand how a human could possibly use a high-level skill like regen. Looking completely unfazed, the youth reminds him that since he didn't want the sword, it officially belongs to its new owner. He meets the warrior's gaze with a cold, steady look that says the hunt is over. Gezeres grits his teeth, his eyes wide as he realizes just how badly he messed up. He stares at the sharp edge of the blade, stunned that his own weapon is now inches from his throat. All that confidence from before has vanished, leaving nothing but a look of silent shock. He keeps a firm grip on the kid's throat, but the shock is plain as day. Suddenly, a circular seal covered in dozens of blinking eyes erupts right where they're touching. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Hirotaka lets the power surge, forcing this strange energy to take over the space between them. Tristan watches the scene unfold, wondering if he really just used his scrap collection skill. Her eyes widen as she tries to make sense of the move. That skill is only supposed to pull back random junk, yet he somehow grabbed the exact magic sword he wanted. Watching him, she wonders if becoming the Demon King changed his old abilities for the better. If the power grew along with his body, it would explain this sudden change in his luck. Hirotaka feels everything clicking into place and realizes he finally has a real shot at winning. That confidence holds as the strange seal fully activates, wrapping him in a heavy, dark aura. But the moment the power kicks in, his expression shifts from determination to shock. Feeling his vision distort, he can barely keep his eyes steady as a sharp sensation pierces through him. A massive wave of information starts flooding his mind, and it's clearly more than he ever expected to handle. As the flood of data hits Hirotaka, Gezeres just stares at the blade in disbelief, asking himself if he is really about to die. He grits his teeth, unable to accept that he's been backed into a corner. Then his ego just snaps. He starts shouting that he's the strongest and refuses to let a pathetic loss like this happen. Hirotaka stands there paralyzed, eyes wide as he struggles to stay conscious through the mental pressure. Gezeres barks at him to wake up, shouting that he shouldn't be dying over something this pathetic. Glaring down, he suddenly realizes the blade isn't moving an inch further. Hirotaka looks back at him in a daze, but his expression seems to belong to someone else entirely. As the strange seal pulses with power, a voice echoes through the silence, identifying himself as Tristan, the Demon King of Wrath. The force of that declaration sends Hirotaka flying, tossing him backward as Gezeres screams about being the strongest Demon King. He hits the ground hard, rolling through the dust until the momentum finally gives out. Face down and silent, he doesn't even try to pick himself up. Gezeres is left gasping for breath, his chest heaving while he tries to recover from that explosive surge of power. Still, he keeps his eyes locked on the strange seal, sensing that the fight isn't over yet. Gezeres gasps for air, his chest heaving as the adrenaline starts to dip. Across from him, Hirotaka isn't doing any better, standing there in a daze while trying to catch his breath. After a long silence, Gezeres looks him in the eye and admits it has been forever since he actually felt the threat of death. He isn't screaming anymore. Instead, he has this cold, focused look on his face. Grabbing his sword hilt, he tells Hirotaka that he has finally made a decision. He tells Hirotaka that he needs to get much stronger. Baffled, Hirotaka just stares back, unable to process the sudden change of heart. Gezeres admits that even with borrowed strength, the kid almost reached his neck. He figures that if Hirotaka actually masters the Demon King's power, he'll reach even greater heights. Flashing a bloodthirsty grin, he promises to be the one who kills Hirotaka once he finally becomes the true strongest. Hirotaka can barely wrap his head around the sudden shift, trembling with frustration as he stares at the ground. Glancing back, Gezeres asks if killing his friends right now would make him more motivated to fight. He doesn't wait for a reply before turning his back and walking away. That wide, predatory grin returns as he admits he's grown fond of those eyes. Left alone, the boy stays frozen on the spot, unable to process the man's sheer madness. Gezeres pauses and turns back as if he just remembered something important. Tightening his grip for a second, he prepares to throw something. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tosses a small item into the air. The object sails over the debris as the demon warrior tells him he can keep it. Hirotaka catches the souvenir, staring at it in silence while the man calls it a reward for the entertainment. Flashing a sharp, toothy grin, Gezeres says he wants to see just how far Hirotaka's greed will take him for the sake of his friends. With that, a low rumble echoes through the air as Gezeres finally flies off. His parting words hang in the air, telling Hirotaka they'll meet again and calling him a fellow comrade. After that, he just stands alone on the desolate wasteland, watching the horizon in total silence. He looks down for a moment, just breathing as the adrenaline starts to fade. He stays quiet, just staring at the ground as the weight of everything sinks in. Even with the fight over, the news of a second demon king appearing has already planted a deep sense of dread in everyone's hearts. Looking at the map, every nation starts rushing to build up their defenses and prepare for the worst. Still, no one understands yet that his arrival is about to completely reshape the fate of the entire world. Instead of the battlefield, the scene shifts to the sound of steady footsteps echoing through a quiet, polished hall. A figure in a dark, fur-lined cloak stops at the entrance of a grand chamber as a voice calls out a welcome to Lord Garizel. Up on the throne, a young man watches the visitor with interest. He mentions that a personal visit is pretty rare and asks what they need to talk about. Garizel brings up the news of the new Demon King, assuming the prince has already heard the rumors. He suggests they need a solid strategy to keep everyone safe, causing the young man to wonder what he has in mind. Grinning, the big man explains that they plan to defeat the Demon King and claim a legendary magic sword. He leans in with a wide smile, promising that once the prince is in control of that blade, no more threats will rise and the world will finally be at peace. Uranus touches his chin, looking a bit skeptical about the whole idea. He points out that even with the entire kingdom's army, they don't have the strength to actually take down a demon king. Garizel tells him there is no need to worry. He says everything will be fine as long as the prince stays on his side. The hall stays quiet while the masked man continues his pitch. Shifting his stance, he explains that while his own territory is small, they have been busy researching a very specific type of technology. He gives a creepy smile, explaining they have developed a way to manufacture their own heroes from scratch. This isn't just recruitment, they are literally building warriors. The prince looks completely stunned as a group of figures suddenly appears in the hall. He can hardly believe it, asking if these are the warriors who will lead the hunt. The masked man steps forward, wearing a grin that's a bit too wide for comfort. Promising to bring order back to the world, he vows that under the prince's protection, they'll take the Demon King down for good. To make it official, he introduces his squad as the 7 Divine Heroes. A few days pass after the battle with the Demon King of Wrath. Back at the house, Mana stares blankly as she tries to process everything. Finding out the dragon was actually a Demon King is one thing, but hearing Hirotaka made a contract with a cursed sword just to survive is a lot to handle. Looking somber, Rachel sighs while thinking about how much they've gone through lately. It has just been one thing after another. Hirotaka is finally back in his human form, which is a massive weight off everyone's shoulders. Mana rushes over and calls out his name, needing to see the situation for herself. Still not fully convinced, she starts poking at him to check if he's real while he just laughs. Tears start welling up as she admits she was terrified he was gone for good. He stays calm and gently tells her that everything is going to be okay. While they share this moment, Osoro just watches from the side, keeping her thoughts to herself. Even with Osoro watching silently, Liza notices something pretty strange about the whole situation. She points out that even though Hirotaka is officially a Demon King, his heart and appearance haven't changed a bit. It's possible that the sword actually saved his humanity before the contract could swallow it up. Looking down at the blade on his belt, he wonders if his new partner really did him such a huge favor. The idea makes Mana burst into tears of relief, and she offers a shaky thank you to the silent weapon. Seeing her like this, Hirotaka admits he's sorry for putting her through, though much worrying again. She admits she understands why he did it, knowing he only signed that contract to protect the group. Suddenly, she holds up her pinky and asks him for a promise, leaving him just staring at her in surprise. She tells him that even if he really does become a demon king, he has to promise never to wander off too far. He just blinks at her for a second, caught off guard by how serious she looks. After a moment, he reaches out and hooks his pinky around hers to make the vow official. Just then, Lizzie jumps in and grabs both their hands with a huge grin. Laughing, she tells them a promise like that is only natural for the two of them. Hirotaka looks a bit stunned by the sudden burst of energy. Still, she just keeps smiling warmly as she looks between them. Mana closes her eyes for a second, appearing a bit more thoughtful than the others. Once they step outside, she asks if it's really a good idea to keep Hirotaka's victory over the Demon King a secret. She points out that reporting it would skyrocket their adventure rank and bring in a massive reward from the kingdom. Even so, he figures it's better to keep things quiet. The last thing he wants is the world knowing he's a demon king, even if it means his friends miss out on the rewards. Looking down, Rachel admits she doesn't have the right to complain since she was knocked out of the fight so early. When she hears that, Mana immediately jumps in to shut the idea down. She points out that during the battle, Rachel used her own magic to shield her from the Demon King's blast without taking a scratch. Mana can't stop gushing about how amazing her friend was, while Lizzie just smiles and gives both girls a supportive pat on the head. Lizzie adds that they're both fine with his choice, while Mana insists she doesn't even care about missing the reward money. As Hirotaka watches them with a skeptical look, Osoro suddenly pops up behind him, complaining that things are getting boring. He immediately snaps back, asking how much longer she plans to stick around now that her goal is technically finished. She doesn't seem to care, floating upside down right in his face and teasing him for his bad attitude. Osoro leans in close, asking if there's anything else he wants to know about the terrifying power of a demon king. She starts mocking him, pretending to cry and beg for his master to stay. Snapping back, Hirotaka calls her a parasite who just wants a free place to slack off, and she cheerfully admits he's right. Despite the jokes, he goes quiet for a moment. He thinks back to when he first got the Legion, remembering those strange, haunting voices that spoke to him during the chaos. Osoro floats upside down, casually mentioning that she'd love to just lounge around all day. Still, she decides to stick around and watch over Hirotaka for a bit, mostly because dealing with Tristan later would be too much trouble. Kenichi stays quiet nearby, his eyes hidden as he stares at the ground. Muttering under his breath, he finally calls the whole situation ridiculous. He turns his back and announces he's heading out right now, leaving Hirotaka behind in total confusion. As he walks away, Osoro points out the obvious, asking if his friend is really just going to ditch them like that. Hirotaka calls out to stop him, but the Demon King just casually suggests he should join their junk characters squad instead. He thinks about the strange undead powers Kenichi has and figures there might be other side effects they don't know about yet. Because of that risk, he really believes it's safer if the whole group sticks together. Kenichi is interested and shuts the invitation down immediately, narrowing his eyes. He tells Hirotaka that this constant need to be kind to everyone is just plain annoying. Rachel can't believe her ears and snaps back, reminding him that they'd all be dead right now if it weren't for Hirotaka's help. Silent for a second, he looks down, hiding his expression. Finally, he turns toward the door, muttering that he'll at least consider the rescue a debt he owes. He adds that he'll definitely pay them back eventually. Looking back over his shoulder, he decides he'll find his own purpose in this world rather than letting Hirotaka hand one to him. With a quick turn, he steps out and disappears through the door. Before he gets too far, He yells back that their party name is totally lame, though someone inside immediately shouts that it's fine. Mana watches him go with wide eyes, wondering if it's really okay for him to just leave. Hirotaka just smiles, thinking to himself that Kenichi is actually a pretty amazing guy. That peaceful moment ends the second the front door bangs open. Stunned, Mana and Hirotaka both freeze at the sight of the person standing there. Liza stares back with a heavy, grim expression, her face marked with dark spots. When they call her teacher, something suddenly clicks for Hirotaka. He remembers she threatened them with the death penalty if they didn't bring back that dragon's head. Between the battle and everything else, they all completely forgot about her. Now they look like they're waiting for the axe to fall. Liza just stares back with a tired, empty look as Hirotaka tries to stutter out a greeting. Suddenly, she drops to her knees, looking like she's about to collapse from exhaustion. Watching her, the kids realize she isn't actually mad, something is seriously wrong with her. Instead of yelling, Liza drops to her knees and tells the kids she's just glad they're still alive. Mina's eyes go wide, clearly surprised to see her normally strict teacher acting this vulnerable. Looking away, the teacher explains that news of the battle didn't even reach the town until it was already over. She admits she never would have let them take such a huge risk if she'd known the dragon was actually a demon king. The two kids just stand there, feeling a bit awkward seeing her act this way. Leaning in, Hirotaka whispers that she feels like a completely different person. Rachel just nods, figuring their teacher is the type who looks cold but is secretly way too protective. Staring at the floor, she apologizes for being so mean and admits she was out of line. She explains those harsh words were only meant to discourage them so they just give up and come back home. Mana watches her in silence as the woman finished her thought. Even when things got impossible, they didn't run away, and she thinks they really proved their potential. Liza smiles warmly, telling them she is just happy they found such a great group of friends. Hearing this, Mina's eyes go wide. She can hardly believe the change of heart. Finally, the teacher gives them the ultimate win by officially recognizing the junk characters as a real party. Without wasting a second, the two of them start jumping and cheering with everything they've got. Even while the tiny versions of the group dance around, Liza watches them with a gentle look. She thinks about how hard Mana worked, admitting the girl pushed herself way past her limits. The room goes quiet as Hirotaka looks up at his teacher, asking how the girl is really doing after all that strain. He and the others wait for an answer, feeling the celebratory mood fade as they face the reality of the situation. Sensing the tension, Rachel starts to sweat as if she's been holding back a secret this entire time. Suddenly, Mana speaks up with a pale face and a trembling voice. She admits that for some reason, she can't use magic anymore. Hirotaka and Rachel just freeze, staring at her as the room goes dead silent. Mana starts sobbing, convinced this is some kind of curse or punishment for her actions. Shutting that idea down immediately, Liza looks completely serious as she explains that if the Demon King Chayakura were actually gone, the power of healing would vanish from the entire world. When the teacher mentions that her own healing spells still work, the girl lets out a small sigh of relief. Still, Liza's expression stays grim while she warns them that the situation is actually getting much more dangerous by the second. Looking inward, she reveals the terrifying truth. Her own source of magic has completely withered away. He can't believe what he's hearing and asks what actually happens now that the source is gone. Rachel explains that mana isn't just for flashy magic. It's a vital nutrient that every living thing needs to survive. Comparing the mana source to a second heart, she warns that if the flow stops completely, it's game over. Panic sets in as he begs to know if there's any way to save her before it's too late. Liza clarifies that sharing magic won't work without a mana source, leaving Rachel looking completely lost as the weight of the situation hits her. While she mentions that a high-level hospital might be the only hope, a strange movement starts in the pouch on Hirotaka's belt as a weird, tentacled eye begins to twitch. Rattling against the straps, The gear starts clicking out of nowhere. Suddenly, a dagger pops loose and hits the ground. He can only stare in disbelief, calling out to Osoro as the weapon moves on its own. Hirotaka asks what's happening all of a sudden, his voice shaking as things get even weirder. Just then, a strange pressure begins to build in his hand. Before he can even process the feeling, a massive blast of white energy erupts right from his palm. Trying to stay on his feet, he notices his waste product collection skill is somehow activating on its own. He stares into the swirling light, unable to understand what he's actually seeing. As the light fades, he finds himself holding a single piece of meat on a bone. Rachel stares in shock, her eyes glued to the sudden snack appearing out of thin air. She guesses his skill just summoned some discarded leftovers, making the whole legendary power feel like a bit of a letdown. Figuring the scrap is useless, he starts to toss it toward the floor. Suddenly, Liza lunges forward and snatches it right out of his hand, leaving him completely stunned. Liza stands there frozen, wondering what she's even doing. She tells herself an irresistible urge just took over her body, and it's definitely not just because she's hungry. Trembling, her eyes go wide as she struggles to understand this sudden instinct. Then, without another word, she starts devouring the meat while the others watch in shock. Guru even screams for her to spit it out, terrified of what might happen. Ignoring the shouting, she finishes the whole thing and stands there with a heavy, blank look. Guru just stands there, pale and unable to move. Before anyone can react, Liza reaches out and grips Guru's face, staring her down with an intense gaze. She pulls the mage in and locks lips with her right there. Guru freezes, her eyes going wide as she's caught completely off guard. Caught in the moment, she can barely process what's happening while the transfer begins. Suddenly, the whole group starts yelling in a panic. Hirotaka just stands there, with his mouth hanging open, unable to find the words for this mess. The others are just as stunned, watching the scene from the back in total silence. Guru tries to yell, but she can't get a word out while Liza keeps the pressure on. With her eyes rolling back and swirling, it's clear the massive surge of energy is hitting her system hard. Facing that much raw power, her body looks like it might actually buckle under the strain. Suddenly, her hair shoots straight up like a flame and her eyes go completely dark. She looks less like a friend and more like something dangerous. Watching from the side, Hirotaka and Rachel are frozen in place, unable to do anything but stare. She stands there for a long moment, steam hissing off her skin as the energy finally begins to settle. Eventually, the transformation fades and her hair falls back down, leaving her looking dazed and exhausted. Liza stares at her, wondering if her mana source actually opened up for a split second. Stunned by the results, Hirotaka can only blink in shock as he tries to process what just happened. Putting a hand to her chin, Rachel admits that those weird leftovers provided a level of healing she has never felt before. They all look at the plain bone, trying to make sense of how such a gross scrap could be so powerful. Suddenly, Osoro pops up behind him and nods, clearly seeing something the others are still trying to figure out. She explains that the meat isn't just a snack, it might actually be the key to fixing the girl's mana source for good. Hirotaka is stunned and asks if she's really serious, but she just teases them about whether she should even share the secret. Liza isn't in the mood for jokes. Looking Osoro right in the eye, she begs for the truth and promises to do anything, even cook her a massive feast if she just explains what's going on. Hirotaka watches with wide eyes, hoping the Demon King actually takes the bait. After a long silence, Osoro admits she doesn't really hate the place they are headed. Floating up with a playful wave, she tells the group to start getting their things together. She flashes a sharp, mischievous grin and mentions they are going to a very specific location. Liza just stares after her, wondering exactly where she is talking about. She soon gets her answer when the group arrives at a pair of massive wooden gates, which Osoro claims belongs to the country where the mana meat originated. Standing deep in the forest, the towering entrance makes everyone look like ants as they approach the threshold.